Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kelly Cochran. Christopher Regan was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, where he spent his early years. At the age of 20, he decided to serve his country and joined the military. Christopher committed himself to protecting the peace and safety of his fellow citizens. Christopher was stationed at a military base near Marquette, where he met Terri O'Donnell, a young teacher from Iron River. They lived in the same area and would often see each other around town as they spent more time together. They remained close friends for many years, but Christopher eventually decided to leave the military and move to Traverse City. Despite the distance between them, they continued to communicate regularly, and in December 2012, Christopher asked Terri to take their relationship to the next level. Terri and Christopher have known each other for many years. They find they have a lot in common. They decide to live together. Terri and Christopher choose Iron River as the perfect place for them to settle down. Christopher finds a job at a factory that makes parts for military ships, where he becomes a supervisor. However, after 2 years of living together, problems began to arise in their relationship. Unfortunately, they didn't make an effort to work through their issues, and it became clear that their relationship was coming to an end. Eventually, they made the difficult decision to go their separate ways. Despite the breakup, they were able to part on good terms and remain friends. After breaking up with Terri, Christopher realized that he couldn't live in her house anymore, so he decided to rent his own house. He felt that the town he lived in was too small, and he wanted a more dynamic city. Christopher began applying for jobs in various locations, sending out his resume in search of a new job. In October 2014, Christopher found a job in Asheville, North Carolina. As Christopher settled into his new life in Asheville, he contacted Terri on October 14th, telling her that he would be taking the day off tomorrow and looking forward to meeting Terri for a walk. However, on October 15th, Christopher did not contact Terri as planned. Terri became worried and tried calling him for several days, but he did not answer. She even contacted their mutual friends. 10 days after Christopher went missing, Terri filed a police report. The police accepted the report and told Terri that Christopher had probably moved to a new job in North Carolina and that he had started a new life and wanted to contact old friends. To avoid speculation, investigators conducted a thorough investigation. They identified Christopher's new workplace and contacted an employee to gather information. However, surprisingly, they found out that Christopher had not shown up to work in 10 days. The police then suspected that he might have been involved in an accident, given his frequent solo outdoor trips. The search for Christopher led investigators to the local woods, where he was known to frequent. Trained search dogs were brought in to aid in the effort. But no signs of Christopher were found. Terri, concerned that Christopher may have been injured or in an accident, suggested searching his former apartment. The investigators agreed and visited the apartment, where they were met with a scene of disarray. Clothes and belongings were scattered across the floor, and closets were left open. Initially, they thought that Christopher might have simply been messy, but Terri disputed this, stating that Christopher was typically neat and organized. The detectives started to suspect a connection between the recent events and the crime. After investigating Christopher's home, they decided to expand their search. A thorough search of the neighborhood led them to find Christopher's car 8 miles outside Iron River, near the city limits. The police found it unusual that the car was left there, suggesting it might have been abandoned unintentionally. After forcing open a door, they searched the interior and found nothing suspicious, only ordinary clothing. However, one of the officers noticed a small yellow piece of paper on the front passenger seat with a detailed route written on it. They decided to follow the route to see where it led. Although the paper did not specify an exact address, the directions were clear. According to Terri, Christopher, although familiar with the city of Iron River, did not know the local street names, so he wrote down the directions using landmarks such as bus stops and gas stations. Terri deduced from the detailed notes that this was Christopher's first time visiting the location. The detectives followed the route outlined on the paper, which led them to a nearby town and a specific house mentioned in Christopher's notes. When they arrived, they knocked on the door to gather information in Christopher's connection to the location. A man named Jason Cochran answered the door, and his wife Kelly was there. The police explained that they were investigating Christopher's disappearance and had found a lead pointing to this address. Terri, who worked with Christopher at the same factory, revealed that they were co-workers. She had tried to contact Christopher via text message in mid-October but had not received a response. Investigators found a note in Christopher's car that showed the route to Jason's house. Although confused, Jason and Kelly agreed to cooperate with the investigation. After a short interrogation without any further clues, the detectives left Jason Cochran's house. Detectives then interviewed Christopher's co-workers at the factory. A supervisor shared that Christopher had been having an affair with Kelly Cochran, which was an open secret among employees. This revelation sparked interest, leading investigators to re-question the Jason and Kelly. During re-interrogation, Kelly confessed to her relationship with Christopher. However, she claimed that she could not reveal this information earlier because her husband Jason was present. According to Kelly, Jason agreed to her affair. However, Christopher's colleagues disputed Kelly's story. They claimed that Jason did not approve of Kelly's affair. When Jason was later brought in for questioning, he completely denied approving of Kelly's affair. His strong objection to Kelly's infidelity aroused suspicion and made him a suspect. The investigation into Christopher's disappearance was ongoing, but the lack of concrete evidence made it impossible to determine whether Kelly was involved. As a result, Kelly and Jason were released from the police station. The case remained unsolved for 5 months. In March 2015, a new investigator, Detective Jeremy Ogden from the Hobart Police Department, took over the case. Jeremy Ogden began by thoroughly examining the Jason Cochran family's background. Kelly and Jason had met in high school and started living together soon after graduation. They had distinct personalities. Kelly was outgoing, sociable, and talkative, while Jason was quiet and reserved. He rarely initiated conversations, only responding to questions asked of him. Despite their differences, they decided to get married. After the wedding, they started a business together, providing swimming pool maintenance services. The business was modest, but it provided a decent income for they. Jason handled most of the pool maintenance work, but the constant stress and physical strain took a toll on his health. He began to experience back problems and felt increasingly heavier every day. Eventually, he realized he could no longer continue running the business. Kelly then took over the responsibilities of running the business, hoping that Jason would soon recover and return to his duties. However, his condition continued to worsen, and medical treatments were not providing the desired relief. Kelly searched for alternative ways to help her husband recover. During her search, Kelly discovered a plant that offered hope for Jason's recovery. However, the plant was banned in their home state, making it inaccessible to them. To access the treatment, Kelly and Jason decided to relocate to Michigan, specifically Iron River Township, in 2014. Jason consulted his doctor and received a prescription for pain medication. Around the same time, in early 2014, Jason's wife, Kelly Cochran, started working at a factory that manufactured parts for U.S. warships. Kelly and Jason moved to the area. Kelly and Jason worked at the same factory where Christopher Regan worked. Christopher and Kelly found common topics of conversation and over time became close friends. This friendship was especially important to Christopher. After gathering evidence, prosecutors presented their case to a Michigan judge to obtain a search warrant for Kelly and Jason's home. The judge granted the warrant, and on March 6, a team of investigators searched Kelly and Jason's home, carefully searching for any evidence related to Christopher's disappearance. The only significant discovery was a book written by Jason. He used a pseudonym in the world of video games. The title of the work was ordinary, but its content was horrifying. In this dark and violent book, Jason described the murder of the person who had harmed him. After reading the book, the detectives noticed a character who bore an uncanny resemblance to Christopher. This raised suspicions about Jason, leading them to wonder if he had been inspired by the real-life crimes he had committed. 3 weeks later, a second search of Jason's home was conducted. The police hoped to find crucial evidence that had been missed in the first search. However, when they arrived at the Jason's home, they found it empty, with no cars in sight. Repeated attempts to knock on the door went unanswered. It was later discovered that Kelly and Jason had fled the state shortly after the initial search, moving to Indiana. Their sudden departure left investigators concerned. Michigan police, needing a DNA sample, asked Indiana police for help. Indiana police went to Jason's new home, where they had just moved. The investigation into Christopher Regan's disappearance ran out of clues. Time passed, and on February 22, 2016, Hobart, Indiana, police received a frantic call from Kelly Cochran, who tried to explain that her husband, Jason, was not breathing. When paramedics arrived, Kelly was in a panic. It was clear that Jason was beyond saving. He was sitting in a chair, his face burning like fire, as if he had overheated. The doctors officially confirmed Jason's death. His body was then sent for a thorough forensic examination. Meanwhile, Kelly was handed over to a police patrol and taken to relatives who lived nearby. To piece together what happened, investigators thoroughly searched Jason's new home. During the search, a police officer found a syringe at the foot of Jason in his wife's bed. Initially, investigators believed Jason's death was due to substance abuse. The medical examiner's report showed that Jason had multiple drugs in his system, but Jason's death was due to strangulation, confirmed by bruises on his neck and face. The focus of the investigation then shifted to Kelly Cochran, who appeared to be connected to both crimes. She was now considered the prime suspect in not only Christopher's disappearance but also her husband's murder. On February 23, 2016, Kelly Cochran was summoned to the police station to answer questions about her husband's death. Under direct questioning and pressure from investigators, Kelly denied any involvement in her husband's death and Christopher's disappearance. She claimed that Jason's death was due to a drug overdose. Months later, investigators still lacked concrete evidence to convict Kelly. During the investigation, Detective Jeremy Ogden met Walter Hammerman, a close friend of Jason's. Kelly informed Walter of Jason's death, who then contacted the police. Walter shared his insights with investigators, saying he did not believe Jason's death was caused by drugs. He claimed that Jason had used herbs to relieve his chronic back pain. In March of the previous year, Jason confided in Walter about his concerns. Jason and Kelly were asked to go to Indiana because the Iron River police suspected them of being involved in Christopher's disappearance. This had a significant impact on Jason, leading to depression. Walter observed the notable change in Jason's behavior, with Kelly increasingly taking control over his life. Jason appeared to be constantly anxious, and he began to avoid social gatherings as soon as Kelly returned from work. As the investigation progressed, this information became a vital link. After the medical examiner determined that Jason had died from strangulation, Detective Ogden devised a plan to pressure Kelly into revealing the truth about Jason's death. Walter, Jason's friend, was used as bait to lure Kelly into a trap. On March 12, 2016, Walter, under police surveillance and equipped with a listening device, called Kelly. He told her that Jason had given him a letter containing important information before his death, with the condition that it be sent to the police if anything happened to him. However, Kelly surprisingly asked Walter to drop the idea, which caught both Walter and the police off guard. Despite this development, the detectives still lacked direct evidence to build a case. In the weeks following her initial questioning, Kelly was subjected to multiple interrogations by investigators trying to uncover the truth. Despite their efforts, she continued to deny any wrongdoing. However, on April 26, 2016, it became apparent that Kelly Cochran had evaded the scrutiny of investigators and was on the loose. Detectives joined forces with police officers from Iron River and Hobart to launch a federal manhunt for Kelly Cochran. Walter Hammerman, who had cooperated with the police, was shocked and frightened by the news. He feared that Kelly might never be caught and could potentially harm him again. As the search for Kelly intensified, her phone went off, leading investigators to believe she was deliberately concealing her location. Kelly evaded police and fled to Wingo, Kentucky, over 6 hours away from Hobart. A detective notified the local authorities to exercise extreme caution if they found Kelly. Police in Wingo identified Kelly at her cousin's house on April 28. Understanding that she posed a potential danger and was prone to attempting to escape, officers rapidly proceeded to the residence, avoiding advance warnings that afternoon and detaining Kelly on site. During the interview, Kelly revealed new details. That Kelly was deeply in love with Jason and wanted to leave the city life behind to start over with him. On October 13, 2015, Jason discovered Kelly's infidelity. Jason made a dark pact. The adulterer was obliged to kill his lover if the affair was exposed. Kelly claimed she had never taken this pact seriously, thinking it was just a joke. However, Jason was resolute and warned Kelly that if she didn't fulfill her end of the bargain, he would take matters into his own hands. Despite her reservations, Kelly reluctantly helped Jason commit a heinous crime. The next evening, October 14, 2015, Christopher arrived at Kelly's house, eager to spend a romantic evening with Christopher while her husband was away. Kelly had planned a fun evening, complete with dinner and intimacy. Kelly and Christopher had dinner together and then went upstairs to the house. Then Jason suddenly appeared. Jason rushed into the bedroom, holding a rifle. Christopher immediately realized that he was in danger. Without hesitation, Jason shot Christopher in the head, killing him. Jason and Kelly then dragged the body down to the basement, where they began to dismember it with a hacksaw. Jason and Kelly cut Christopher's limbs and head off his body and placed the remains in several garbage bags. They then dumped the bags in the woods near Crystal Falls. To avoid suspicion, they drove Christopher's car away from the house. Kelly and Jason thoroughly cleaned the house to remove any evidence of the crime. Kelly was consumed by a deep-seated anger towards her husband, whom she blamed for ruining her chance at happiness with he she truly loved, Christopher. She couldn't forgive her husband for depriving her of the opportunity to be with him, and the pain and loss she felt lingered every day. Kelly's resentment towards her husband eventually turned to hatred, and she knew she could no longer live peacefully with him. An opportunity for revenge presented itself on February 22, 2016, when her husband complained of back pain. Kelly convinced him to let her give her an injection, but she deliberately gave him a dose that killed him. However, the medication didn't work as planned, and her husband was still breathing. Kelly then suffocated him by covering his mouth and nose with her hands. To ensure he was dead, she also squeezed his neck, which explained the bruises found on his body. After confessing to the crime, Kelly cooperated with the police to help them locate Christopher's remains. On May 18, 2016, Detective Jeremy Ogden led a team to a remote area near Crystal Falls to search for Christopher's body. A canine unit picked up the scent and led the team to a small hill, where they found a human skull with bullet holes, indicating a homicide. The team believed they had discovered Christopher's remains. Further examination of the scene yielded additional evidence, including a .22 caliber bullet, a broken firearm. Dental records later confirmed the victim's identity. This breakthrough finally solved the case that had haunted investigators for 2 years. Kelly Cochran was formally charged with the murders of Christopher and Jason Cochran in April 2016. On February 13, 2017, Kelly was brought to court in Michigan to face charges. The prosecutor argued that Kelly was the mastermind behind the crime and that she had planned and executed. The prosecution presented strong evidence, including Kelly's own confession, to support their case. However, Kelly told a different story. She claimed that her husband, Jason, was the one who had planned and committed the crime. According to Kelly, Jason was jealous and had been abusing her. On the day of the crime, Jason allegedly hid in the basement and surprised Kelly and Christopher, then shot Christopher in a fit of rage. Kelly also claimed that Jason had forced her to help him dismember the body by threatening to harm her. Despite Kelly's new version of events, the jury found her guilty of premeditated murder after deliberating for 3 hours. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After being sentenced, Kelly Cochran was sent directly to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Ionia, Michigan, where she is currently serving her sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diane Holick. Diane Holick, a 43-year-old senior executive at IBM, was known for her reliability. So when she missed a scheduled work call on the morning of November 16, 2001, her colleagues were immediately concerned. Unable to reach her, they alerted the police, asking them to check on her at home. The officers' discovery at her house was gruesome. Born in 1958 in New York City, Diane was a driven person who had built a successful career at IBM, one of the world's largest hardware and software companies. Over 20 years, her hard work had earned her a senior position, allowing her to work from her home office in Austin, Texas, where she had moved in 1996. Diane lived a luxurious life in the suburbs, hosting wine-tasting parties, frequenting expensive restaurants and dance clubs, and engaging in charity work. She was also trying to improve her personal life. In mid-November 2001, a severe storm warning was in effect in Texas, bringing torrential rains and tornadoes to Austin. On the morning of November 16th, Diane worked from home, but her company had scheduled a work call. Despite having multiple phones, including her home phone, she stopped answering all of them. Her colleagues left messages asking her to call back, and they soon became concerned when she didn't respond. They contacted the police department and requested that someone be sent to Diane's house to check on her welfare. When the officers arrived, Diane's neighbor, who had a spare key, noticed their presence. The police entered the house, where they were met with complete silence, broken only by the sound of dogs emerging from the kitchen. As they received no response from Diane, they began to search the house. In the second-floor bedroom, they made the grim discovery of Diane Holick's lifeless body. Diane's home was one of the cleanest crime scenes detectives had ever encountered. Her body, fully dressed, lay in the bedroom next to her bed. Strangulation marks on her neck, resembling those left by a rope, and signs of wrist binding with cable ties, indicated a crime had taken place. The lack of theft, struggle, or forced entry led detectives to suspect that Diane's killer was someone she knew and trusted. There was no evidence of forced intimacy before her death, but dark spots and red stains on the carpet near the bedroom entrance suggested a possible struggle. One anomaly in the otherwise tidy home caught the detectives' attention. A towel lying on the back of the living room sofa seemed out of place. They sent it to the laboratory for analysis, hoping it might provide a crucial clue. The police spoke to the people who knew Diane and found that she didn't have any known enemies, although it's possible that some might have been unknown. During their investigation, they discovered that Diane was in a romantic relationship with Dennis Conley, the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. This wasn't her first marriage. Her previous one had ended quickly. Diane and Dennis met through a dating service, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage. Dennis was a businessman living in Houston, around 150 miles from Austin, where Diane resided. Despite the distance and infrequent meetings, they grew close quickly, and after 2 months of communicating, Dennis proposed to Diane, giving her a $17,500 platinum ring. She accepted his proposal. According to Diane's close friends, her relationship with Dennis had begun to deteriorate recently. As an independent woman focused on building her career, Diane felt uneasy with Dennis's occasional attempts to control her. Another issue was the decision to move to Houston. The couple had decided to start their life together in his hometown, so Diane put her suburban Austin home up for sale. However, realtors struggled to find a buyer willing to pay the $435,000 asking price for the property. Detectives investigated whether Dennis was involved in Diane's death, asking him to come to the police station for a voluntary conversation without an attorney. Dennis agreed and spoke candidly with the detectives. The medical examiner's report indicated that Diane died between 3 p.m. on November 15th and 3 a.m. on November 16th. A strange detail caught their attention. Diane's wedding ring, given to her by Dennis, was missing from her finger, while her other jewelry in the bedroom remained untouched. This led to the theory that the killer had a personal motive or deliberately removed the ring to mislead the investigation. Dennis presented himself as a grieving person. The detectives asked him about his relationship with Diane and his whereabouts on the day of her death and the day her body was found. According to Dennis, he was in Houston at the time, claiming he last spoke with Diane on the morning of November 15th. He spent the entire day at work, without contacting her again the following morning. When he couldn't reach her, he left a voicemail, unaware of her death. Dennis acknowledged that their relationship was troubled, revealing recent arguments before concluding the conversation. The police collected his fingerprints and a DNA sample, but it was possible he could have traveled to Austin, interacted with Diane, and returned to Houston by the next morning. However, after verifying his alibi, the detectives determined he had not left the city, so they had to pursue another suspect. Before leaving the police station, Dennis provided a crucial lead that changed the direction of the investigation, pointing out that Rye, one of Diane's co-workers, had shown an unusual interest in her. The detectives looked into this and found that Rye frequently visited Diane's home and sometimes walked her dogs, but he had a solid alibi, ruling him out as a suspect. When speaking with Diane's colleagues, the authorities discovered that a mysterious individual had inspected her house a few days before her death. He claimed he would make a cash offer if he liked the property, and planned to return with his wife in a few days to make a joint decision on the purchase. As this was one of the few leads the police had, they concentrated all their efforts on finding this unknown buyer, hoping someone might have seen him when he visited Diane's house. The detectives decided to investigate the owners of properties for sale in the area where Diane lived, suspecting that the mysterious buyer might have viewed more than just the victim's house. They conducted interviews with the owners and discovered that 7 women had experienced a similar incident. A 35 to 45-year-old man with a prominent nose and dark hair, styled back, had visited their homes on the day of Diane's death, without a real estate agent present. While 6 women had refused him entry, 1 woman had allowed him inside. According to her, the man's behavior became strange after entering the house. He didn't show any interest in the rooms or doors, and only asked her to show him the second-floor bedroom. She sensed something was off and asked him to leave. Notably, he had introduced himself as Walter Miller when requesting permission to view the property. The police searched their databases for the name Walter Miller in Austin, but found 2 individuals with that name. neither of whom matched the age or physical description of the suspect. As detectives probed the motive behind the crime, they wondered why the thief had only taken the wedding ring and whether they might have stolen other jewelry or cash, given the victim's wealth and history of living alone, which made it impossible to determine the extent of her jewelry collection. They also questioned the significance of the perpetrator removing the cable ties that bound Diane's hands and taking them with him. Did he know her personally? The autopsy revealed no signs of sexual assault prior to Diane's death, and her body was found fully clothed. Despite this, the detectives returned to her home to search for any traces of semen, assuming the perpetrator might have left behind some evidence. However, their search yielded nothing. A composite sketch of a potential suspect was broadcast on evening news programs, urging anyone with information about a similar individual to come forward. One of the few leads available to investigators was a few strands of hair found on a towel at Diane's residence. Although the hair lacked roots, preventing a complete DNA analysis, detectives remained hopeful that a partial DNA profile could still yield results. A woman contacted the police after seeing the composite sketch, which she believed resembled a suspect in the Diane Hollick case. During her interview with detectives, she recounted how she and her husband had listed their house for sale 6 months prior. A man had arrived, claiming he wanted to purchase the property with cash, but needed to view it first. Since no real estate agent was present, she refused to let the stranger inside. 2 months later, the same man reappeared on her doorstep, introducing himself as Jim Taylor. With her husband away at work and only her young daughter present, the man again asked to enter the house. When she denied his request, he became agitated, shouting and insisting that he be allowed inside. The woman threatened to call the police, prompting the would-be buyer to leave. Still shaken, she wrote down the man's name and the license plate number of his minivan, which had been parked in her driveway. When she saw the suspect's portrait on the news, she immediately recognized him as the same person who had come to her house a while back. This new information led the police to obtain the license plate number, which they then used to identify the vehicle's owner through their database. However, the owner's name was not Jim Taylor, as they had initially suspected, but rather Patrick Anthony Russo. At first, it seemed unlikely that Russo was involved in Diane's death. He appeared to be a family man, living 40 minutes from Austin with his wife and 2 children, and even played in a local church music band. But as the police dug deeper into his past, they discovered a more sinister history. Russo was an ex-convict who had served time for a series of attacks on women. One of these attacks had even escalated to abduction, where he had tied his victim up with cable ties and attempted to strangle her, stopping only at the last moment. For this crime, he had been sentenced to 20 years in prison. While serving his sentence, Anthony Russo met his future wife Janet, a volunteer at the prison's church program. Despite his lengthy criminal record, Russo was granted parole after serving 8 years of his 20-year sentence. The police were skeptical about the coincidence, so they obtained a search warrant for Anthony Russo's residence. When the police arrived, Anthony answered the door, but they found no incriminating evidence inside his house, including Diane's ring or any other personal belongings. A subsequent search of his minivan also yielded nothing. However, the neighbors reported seeing a similar vehicle parked outside Diane's house on the day of her murder. Significantly, the police discovered several cable ties in the utility room that matched the ones that left marks on Diane's wrists. Although we might consider the tie as evidence, it's still indirect because anyone can purchase it at a hardware store. The investigator informed Anthony that his name had come up during an investigation and asked him to come to the station for a more in-depth conversation. At the station, the investigators asked Russo about his whereabouts on November 15th and 16th. Russo explained that on Thursday, the 15th, he traveled to Austin to visit a religious radio station but was unable to enter because no one answered the door. Coincidentally, this radio station is located near Diane Hall's house. According to Russo, he headed home around 4 p.m., but got slightly lost due to a hurricane, which delayed his arrival until around 6 p.m. When the police questioned Russo about his intentions to purchase a house, he claimed he had never browsed any properties for sale. This response proved to be pivotal, as it would later have significant repercussions. Upon being shown a photograph of Diane, Russo remained expressionless and denied ever having met her. Although the police were unable to find any evidence linking Russo to the crime, they were forced to release him. However, the following day, detectives visited the radio station Russo had mentioned and uncovered evidence that his previous statement about the closed doors was a fabrication. The employees at the station revealed that they had not closed the doors, as a large crowd had gathered in the lobby due to an approaching tornado. Meanwhile, a second woman approached the police after encountering a man who resembled the suspect's sketch while trying to sell her house. When the stranger came to her door with a pamphlet featuring local house listings, including her own, she let him in to view the property under the pretense that he would make a cash offer. However, when she showed him a bedroom, he attempted to attack her, but retreated hastily upon hearing her child cry in the adjacent room. The quick-thinking woman retained the pamphlet, which held a crucial fingerprint that the police later matched to Anthony Russo. Russo's claim of never having looked at houses for sale was thus discredited, and his false statement constituted a misdemeanor, a probation violation. Russo's arrest was prompted by his failure to meet parole conditions. Fearing he might flee while they gathered evidence linking him to Diane's death, authorities deemed it necessary to detain him. The police tracked down 15 women who had shown Russo around their homes. All of these women were later brought in to identify the suspect. In a lineup, the women saw 5 men, including Anthony Russo, all dressed similarly and with similar appearances. Each of these men repeated the phrase, "You have a beautiful house," in turn. 10 of the 15 women identified Anthony Russo as the man who had viewed their homes prior to purchasing. The other 5 women were unable to make a positive identification. When the police questioned Russo again, he knew he had been caught lying. Despite this, he continued to proclaim his innocence. At one point, he requested to see his wife and then refused to answer any more questions. The detectives soon received a report from the laboratory, which confirmed that the mitochondrial sequence of the hair found on the towel at Diane's house matched Anthony Russo's DNA. While this was a significant finding, it was not conclusive, as there was a small chance, 1 in 12,900,000, according to court documents, that the hair could have belonged to someone else. Although the investigation had accumulated a significant amount of circumstantial evidence, there was no single piece of direct evidence linking Russo to Diane Hollick's death. One additional piece of circumstantial evidence, however, was the report on the location of his cell phone, which placed Russo in the same area where Diane lived on the day she died. After examining the computer seized from his house, experts found a disturbing search history. Russo, a 37-year-old father of 2 and regular churchgoer, frequently visited an adult website. On this site, he watched videos and read articles about strangulation during intimate interactions. Notably, access to these materials required payment. Even more alarming was the discovery that just days before Diane's death, Russo read a story about a man who posed as a buyer to enter a lonely woman's home, strangled her, and then stole valuables, making it seem like a robbery to conceal his true motive of satisfying a desire for strangulation. The detectives conducted a thorough investigation into Russo and his wife's financial situation. Despite having only $2,000 in savings, Russo claimed to be in the market for a new home, which raised suspicions. Furthermore, the couple had yet to pay off the mortgage on their current residence, although there was no concrete evidence to prove this. On February 5, 2004, more than 2 years after Diane Hollick's death, the police arrested Anthony Russo on suspicion of her murder. During his trial, 14 women took the stand, testifying under oath that Russo had approached them about purchasing a house. Several of these women reported that Russo had visited them on the day of Diane's death, although they refused to let him into their homes. One woman, however, initially allowed him in before asking him to leave due to his unusual behavior. Notably, all the women Russo targeted were of a similar age, suggesting that he had been observing them before making his move. Russo appeared to have a specific type of woman in mind. The prosecution presented the evidence again, describing the events of that fateful November day. As previously stated, Diane informed a colleague that a potential buyer had visited to view the house. Prosecutors suggested that Russo learned Diane lived alone when he first saw the house on November 15th. He toured homes for sale, but only one woman, Diane, let him inside. On his return to Diane's house, Russo likely asked to view the property again, but this time with a sinister motive, carefully planning his actions to avoid leaving evidence. On the rainy day, Diane unexpectedly offered him a towel to dry his hands and face, which he carelessly discarded on the back of the sofa. As she showed him the house again, Russo attacked her on the second floor. Prosecutors believed Russo derived pleasure from strangling, ultimately causing Diane's death during their second encounter. Before leaving, Russo stole cable ties and Diane's wedding ring, which the police were unable to find. He locked the door using a spare key kept at the front door. Russo's former and current wives testified in court, and both claimed that Anthony Russo took pleasure in the act of strangulation. It's notable that this was not his first offense, as he had a prior conviction for a similar crime. After deliberating for 11 hours, the jury found Patrick Anthony Russo guilty, and the court sentenced him to life in prison. Despite his history of criminal behavior, Russo never admitted to his guilt. He will become eligible for parole again and can file his first parole petition in 2044, at which point he will be over 80 years old. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Valerie Tiemann. Valerie Tiemann was born on December 31, 1981, in Salem, Virginia. Valerie Joy Harmon was the child of Sarah Jean Sampson Harmon and Jean Allen Harmon. She grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, and graduated from Hampton Park Christian School in 2000. Valerie then earned her cosmetology degree from Bob Jones University. Known for her warm, friendly smile and outgoing personality, Valerie was passionate about drama and speech. She enjoyed music, playing the piano and flute. Using her cosmetology skills, Valerie worked in salons, spas, and pageants, helping others look and feel their best. Valerie met Matt through a mutual friend when she was 22. Despite their contrasting personalities, Valerie was outgoing and cheerful, while Matt was more withdrawn. They made it work. The couple got married in 2004 and initially lived harmoniously in Matt's small house after their honeymoon. However, Valerie's parents soon noticed changes in her behavior. Matt tightly controlled their finances, forcing Valerie to open a separate bank account to save personally. As time passed, Matt's behavior worsened as he sought to control every aspect of Valerie's life and blamed her for all their problems. Valerie endured much emotional pain, but eventually reached her breaking point. After 10 years, she divorced Matt, seeking a fresh start. Luke Tiemann brought a fresh start to Valerie's life, helping her put her past problems behind her. With his 10-year Army background, including service in Iraq and Afghanistan, Valerie saw him as a reliable and loving partner. Her relatives noticed a significant change in her as she became cheerful and smiling once again, just like 10 years prior. The couple got married on June 6, 2014, and began living at Luke's parents' house in Fairfield, Maine, while Valerie's parents resided in South Carolina. After visiting her family in South Carolina, Luke and Valerie returned to Maine in August 2016. On August 24, 2016, Valerie's mother, Sarah Jean Harmon, had her last conversation with her daughter through text messages. Around that time, Luke had started chatting with a woman on Facebook and was seen with her by several people. On the night of August 24th, Luke and the woman were intimate, and it appears that Valerie discovered their infidelity that night. On August 25th, 2016, Valerie called Luke 31 times within a 5-hour span. A mutual friend of the couple contacted Valerie via Messenger, informing her that Luke was involved with other women and claiming they were separated. Valerie responded with several messages, expressing her heartbreak and conveying that God had a plan, and that Luke would never find a better woman than her, and that he had lost her. On August 26, 2016, Luke Tiemann moved in with the woman he was having an affair with, claiming to her that his wife Valerie had left him for another man. Meanwhile, Valerie's parents, Sarah Jean and Alan Harmon, were growing concerned because Valerie, who had been calling them every week, had suddenly stopped responding to their calls and texts. After a week of trying to reach her, they decided to contact Luke, asking how he and Valerie were doing. The next day, Luke replied, saying they were fine and that he loved her very much. However, another 13 days went by with no word from Valerie, prompting her parents to reach out to Luke's father for help. To their shock, Luke's father told them that Valerie had been missing for about 2 weeks and that they had not seen her. He even asked what to do with her belongings. When Alan confronted Luke about why he hadn't told them about Valerie's disappearance, Luke claimed he was waiting for Valerie to contact her parents herself, as he didn't want to speak poorly of her. He repeated the story that Valerie had left him for another man, but her parents knew it was untrue. It was out of character for Valerie, and they were certain she would have reached out to them because she knew they would worry. On September 9, 2016, Alan filed a report with the Fairfield Police Department stating Valerie was missing. The detectives launched an investigation, which began with a visit to Luke Tiemann's parents, where Valerie had been living with her husband. During the visit, they spoke with Luke's mother, Laurel Tiemann, but she claimed to have no knowledge of their whereabouts. As a result, the detectives left without gaining any new information. Valerie's parents had always thought it was difficult for their daughter to live with Laurel, who they saw as overbearing. 2 weeks after Valerie's disappearance, Laurel packed all of her belongings into garbage bags. This action clearly reflected Laurel's attitude towards her daughter-in-law. She seemed unconcerned about Valerie's well-being and was primarily motivated by a desire to clear the house of her belongings. The police were searching for Luke Tiemann to ask him some questions, but he was nowhere to be found. They went to his home, but he wasn't there. And his parents claimed they didn't know his whereabouts. However, 5 days after Valerie's disappearance, Luke unexpectedly contacted the police himself, stating that he was aware they wanted to speak with him. During the conversation, the detectives asked him about Valerie and the last time he saw her. Luke's response was peculiar. He explained that, about 2 weeks prior, he and Valerie had stopped by the local Walmart to purchase some groceries. While he went inside the store, Valerie stayed in the car. When he finished shopping and returned to the vehicle, Valerie was gone. Luke claimed that he tried to reach her by calling and texting, offering to take her back. He also revealed that his marriage to Valerie was on the verge of collapse. According to him, Valerie had mentioned another man during a conversation, leading him to believe she was having an affair. Despite this, Luke didn't know the man's identity or address, and he assumed Valerie had left him for this unknown individual. Valerie's family, however, insisted she had never mentioned anyone else besides Luke Tiemann in her life. The police made a public appeal through the media, releasing a photo of Valerie and asking anyone who had seen her in the recent weeks to come forward with information for the detectives. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance from the Walmart parking lot, including her belongings being found in garbage bags, seemed suspicious. It was also unclear why Luke Tiemann, Valerie's husband, had made no effort to search for her, possibly due to being preoccupied with another woman. investigators visited the Walmart where Luke and Valerie had been on the day of her disappearance, where they reviewed the surveillance footage. Despite searching for over an hour, they found no evidence of Luke, his red pickup truck, or Valerie on any of the recordings. This discovery revealed that Luke had lied to the police and that he was hiding something. The investigators decided to interview Luke in person, but they didn't disclose all the information they had obtained. They suspected that he might contradict himself or alter his story if he knew what they knew. Luke's open affair with Billie Jo Goodman didn't go unnoticed by anyone. While he admitted to cheating on Valerie, he claimed it was an attempt to heal from their recent breakup. Billie Jo, however, had a string of failed relationships behind her, but when she met Luke, she believed he was the one with whom she could build a stable future. This new development led investigators to a crucial question. Did Valerie pose a threat to Luke and Billie Jo's budding relationship? Was it possible that the couple wanted to start anew, and Valerie's presence was an obstacle they decided to eliminate to ensure their plans went undisrupted? The police interviewed Billie Jo, who claimed she thought Luke had divorced his wife. When questioned, she denied any knowledge of Valerie Tiemann's disappearance. Meanwhile, a local informant tipped off the police about a driver's license found in a parking lot near Billie Jo's home, and it belonged to Valerie. This discovery raised suspicions, as it seemed unlikely that Valerie would abandon her belongings and identification to run off with someone else. On September 19, 2016, Luke Tiemann gave an interview to News Center Maine, 10 days after Valerie's father, Alan, had filed a missing persons report with the police. During the interview, Luke told reporters that he and Valerie had gone to Walmart, but Valerie was not in the car when he returned. At the time, he was unaware that the Walmart CCTV footage did not corroborate his account. Police dogs trained to detect human remains were brought in to search the last known place where Valerie lived. The search plan involved checking the house, the land, and the stream. After about 5 minutes, a police dog picked up a scent in the woods behind the Tiemann family house. An officer began digging the soil with his hands and found a shoe sticking out of the ground. Other officers, wearing gloves, joined in to help dig. They eventually uncovered a woman's body, wrapped in a blanket and buried with a collection of unusual items. These items included a bag of potato chips, a bottle of Gucci perfume, a package of sweet tarts, a flannel shirt, a mason jar, a handwritten note, and a wedding ring. The ring was discovered later when evidence was being prepared for trial. Sergeant Scott Bryant, chief of Maine's evidence response team, was processing the contents of the mason jar, which included dirt, flower stems, and twigs, when he heard a thud and found the ring. Although it was not specified who the ring belonged to or whether it was a man's or woman's, Bryant noted that the ring was much larger than his own wedding ring. The body was transported to the forensic medical examiner's office for an autopsy and identification. Unfortunately, Sarah Jean and Alan Harmon received the devastating news that every parent fears the most. The body discovered behind the Tiemann family house was identified as their daughter, Valerie. Valerie lived in the house with Luke, as well as his parents and younger brother Sam. The detectives searched the barn and found landscaping tools that belonged to Sam, which were used to dig the burial site where Valerie's body was found. They also discovered a device related to illegal substance use. Further investigation revealed that Sam Tiemann had a history of using illegal substances, which Valerie had confided in her parents about during her visit to South Carolina. The police had to investigate whether Sam Tiemann was involved in Valerie's death. During a search of Luke's parents' bedroom, investigators discovered a .45 caliber handgun that Luke Tiemann had purchased in 2015. Despite this, Luke's parents claimed to have had no knowledge of Valerie's burial near their house, which seems unlikely. Around the time Valerie's body was found, investigators also discovered Luke with his new girlfriend, Billie Jo. Luke Tiemann was arrested and taken in for questioning. He told investigators that Valerie had died from an overdose on August 25th, about a month prior due to her use of illegal substances. According to Luke, he didn't inform Valerie's parents about her death because he wanted to spare them the knowledge of her drug use. Instead of calling 911, he left her body in bed until evening, then wrapped her in a blanket, added a note, and buried her in the woods behind the house with the help of his brother Sam. According to Luke, Valerie did not have any physical injuries before she died. However, the autopsy results revealed that Luke was not telling the truth. Although Valerie's blood showed no traces of banned substances, it did contain prescription drugs. But that was not the most astonishing finding. Valerie died from 2 gunshot wounds, one to the head and the other to the neck. The ballistics examination indicated that the bullets removed from Valerie's body came from a .45 caliber handgun. Significantly, this handgun matched the one found by investigators in Luke's parents' bedroom during a search. Luke admitted to buying the gun about a year prior, claiming it was for his father. Despite this, he denied knowing that Valerie had been shot. Luke Tiemann, 32, has been charged with the murder of his 34-year-old wife, Valerie Tiemann. Although his parents and younger brother were investigated, no evidence was found to implicate them. Luke claimed that his brother, Sam, helped him bury Valerie's body, but the police found that Sam was not at home at the time, and it remains unclear whether Luke's parents were aware of or involved in Valerie's death. It is noteworthy that they did not report hearing 2 gunshots on April 2, 2018. The trial began in Somerset County Superior Court in Skowhegan, Maine, with opening statements marking the start of a 5-day trial. Luke pleaded not guilty, arguing that he had been framed. He claimed that he would not have left incriminating evidence, such as an engagement ring and a note, near the body. But forensic examinations linked all the items found with Valerie's body to Luke Tiemann. A computer forensics expert testified, revealing that Valerie's phone was last used on August 25, 2016, the day the police believe she died. The detective explained how tracking cell phone usage can help determine an individual's location at the time of a call. Valerie made 31 calls to Luke on the same day he allegedly spent time with his new girlfriend, Billie Joe. Luke only answered the last call, which lasted around 13 minutes. The police believe he was at home when the call ended. The morning after Valerie's disappearance, a woman sent a message to Valerie's phone, accusing Luke of cheating on her. This was the last time the woman was heard from. Luke's defense team questioned the authenticity of these phone records. In court, Luke's younger brother, Sam Tiemann, testified against him. Luke had told the police that Sam helped him bury Valerie's body, but Sam denied any involvement, claiming he was working 2 hours away at the time and had his work log as proof. Sam told the court that he confronted Luke after hearing he had implicated him, and Luke responded by saying, "What else do you do with a dead body?" The police continued to press Luke about who shot Valerie, even suggesting that his brother Sam or their parents might be involved. Luke insisted that they were incapable of such an act. The officers wondered if Luke might have blacked out due to his PTSD, which he had previously claimed would sometimes cause him to become enraged and forgetful afterwards. Several witnesses called by the prosecutor testified in court about the private lives of Luke and Valerie Tiemann. They gave detailed accounts of how the couple frequently used significant amounts of illegal drugs. Additionally, they stated that Luke had informed people he was getting a divorce around the same time Valerie went missing. Luke's former girlfriend, Jackie Spencer, revealed to the jury that she had a close relationship with the couple and had even served as the maid of honor at their wedding. She stated that she had personally witnessed Valerie and Luke using various illegal drugs together. Furthermore, she testified that Luke had begun sending her numerous text messages around the time Valerie vanished, suggesting that he may have been interested in pursuing a romantic relationship with her. The jury was shown evidence from the crime scene, which included a video that depicted the approximately 3-minute walk from where Valerie's body was discovered to the Tiemann's home. The video footage revealed an overgrown, all-terrain vehicle trail winding through a thickly forested area, a common feature found behind many rural homes in Maine. The defense team, representing Luke, raised objections to certain pieces of evidence, including gardening tools found in a shed near the property and a .45 caliber handgun discovered in one of the rooms of the home. They contended that the prosecution had failed to establish ownership of these items, suggesting that someone else in the household may have had access to them. During the trial, Luke Tiemann acknowledged that he had changed his story multiple times, alleging that detectives had coerced him into providing false testimony. He insisted that he had no reason to kill his wife and that there was no DNA evidence connecting him to the crime scene. The prosecutors, however, argued that Tiemann was the only person who could have harmed Valerie, and that all the evidence pointed to his guilt. The jury took less than an hour to deliberate before finding Tiemann guilty. At the sentencing hearing, Valerie's mother expressed her grief and outrage, denouncing Tiemann as an evil-hearted man who still refused to accept responsibility for his actions and demanded a life sentence. In contrast, Tiemann's mother begged the court to consider her son's entire life and to balance justice with compassion. Ultimately, Tiemann received a 55-year prison sentence, which was longer than his family had hoped. Despite later changing his testimony again while incarcerated, this did not have a positive impact on his case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ada Betty Quadros Fernandez. Ada Quadros was born on September 13, 1977, in the coastal town of Chimote, Peru, to Victor Quadros, a veterinarian, and Elle Fernandez, a teacher. As the eldest of 4 siblings, Ada consistently excelled academically, winning knowledge contests and enjoying a happy childhood. Growing up, Ada spent a lot of time with one of her sisters on their grandparents' farm, developing a strong connection with nature and animals. This period was one of the happiest times of her life. Ada's family was middle class, not poor, but not wealthy either. During her teenage years, she sought ways to contribute financially, forming an entertainment group with her sister and a friend to perform at children's parties. After high school, Ada enrolled in a private university to study law, but unfortunately, her family's financial situation made it impossible for her to continue, and she was forced to drop out. Despite this setback, Ada was determined to succeed and support her family. With the goal of building a better life in mind, Ada applied for a US visa through the lottery program. Like many young people from Peru and Latin American countries, Ada viewed the United States as a land of unlimited opportunities. She was determined to migrate, work hard, earn a better income, and create a brighter future for herself and her family. Her family was overjoyed for her and sold some of their belongings to gather enough money for her journey. Her initial destination was Texas, where she planned to stay with some relatives. In early 2004, Ada started working as a waitress at a restaurant. Later, she found employment with a company that placed nannies in households, which is how she met the Lazarchik family. The family consisted of Michael, commonly known as Mike, his wife Renee, and their 3 children, Elisa, and twin boys Ryan and Kyle. Little is known about the family's background, except that Mike and Renee got married in 2000, and shortly after, Renee became pregnant with their first child, Elisa. 4 months after Elisa's birth, Renee was expecting again, this time with twins Kyle and Ryan. The Lazarchik couple was searching for a reliable nanny to care for their twins when Renee returned to work. Since Elisa was already settled in a daycare where she attended daily and had made friends, they decided to keep her there. After interviewing several candidates, they found Ada to be the most suitable. At 27, Ada was young yet mature, appearing healthy, strong, well-mannered, and cheerful. Renee wanted Ada to start right away, so she could spend a few weeks showing her the household routines, explaining where everything was, and outlining her expectations. This would also give Renee the opportunity to observe how Ada interacted with the young twins, who were just over a year old. The family had one non-negotiable condition. They required a commitment from Ada to stay with them for at least 18 months, which she agreed to. Initially, the agreement was that Ada would only spend her days at the Lazarchuk household. But later on, they asked her to move in full-time, and she accepted. As a result, she only went back to her uncle's house on weekends. Everything seemed to be going well, and the Lazarchuk family was more than satisfied with Ada's work and had grown to trust her completely. They had many happy memories, captured in photos, of Ada smiling and caring for the twins. However, the Lazarchuk family's situation took a dramatic turn in the summer of 2005. Ada broke the news to them that her uncles were returning to Peru and then moving to Germany, and she intended to go with them, having already bought her plane ticket for October 29th. This was a blow to the couple, as it was not what they had originally agreed upon. Eventually, they came to terms with it and only asked Ada to stay on until they could find a suitable replacement. They even asked for her help in finding and selecting her successor, and Ada agreed to assist them. After Ada stopped sleeping over at the Lazarchuks, she would go back to her uncle's house every night and return early the next morning. With her departure approaching, the Lazarchuks arranged to meet several potential nannies on Wednesday, October 12th. During the day, Renee asked Ada to prepare macaroni and cheese for the children, which Ada did. After feeding the kids, Ada waited for Renee's return. When Renee got back home, she greeted her children, making sure they were doing fine. After conducting some interviews, she spent over an hour with her kids before putting them to bed. Everything appeared normal. However, at exactly 5 a.m. on Thursday, October 13th, Kyle woke up crying, which was unusual since the twins were heavy sleepers who never woke up on their own. Renee got up, went to their room, comforted Kyle until he fell asleep again, and then returned to bed. At 7:30, 2 hours later, Mike entered the children's room, roused them from sleep, gave them a hug and a kiss, and left them in Ada's care before departing for work. Just before 9:30, Renee awoke, spent time with the twins, changed Ryan's diaper, bid farewell to both Ryan and Kyle, and then headed to work. Throughout this period, the children were doing fine, with the only unusual occurrence being Kyle's early awakening that day. Elisa, their older sister, went to daycare as usual, but around 1 p.m., Ada's 911 call marked a dramatic turn of events. In a highly agitated state, Ada reported that Kyle, one of the children, had stopped breathing and was turning blue. After providing the address, the operator guided Ada through performing CPR on Kyle, while paramedics rushed to the scene. Minutes later, paramedics arrived and took charge of Kyle's care. They questioned Ada, who was very distressed about what had happened. Ada explained that after lunch, she had put Kyle to bed in his crib and left to fetch his brother Ryan. When she returned with Ryan, Kyle suddenly began vomiting and stopped breathing. While paramedics treated Kyle, Ada phoned Renee to update her on the situation, providing a modified account of what had happened. According to Ada, after feeding the children, she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor, as was her usual practice, before going to fetch his brother. However, when she returned, she found Kyle vomiting. She went to the kitchen to grab a bowl to contain the vomit, and upon her return, she discovered that Kyle had fallen. Ada claimed she picked him up, took him to the sink, and performed the breathing rescue technique Renee had taught her, but it didn't work. She also attempted CPR. Following initial treatment, the paramedics rushed Kyle to the nearest hospital. By the time Renee arrived at the house, the ambulance carrying her son had already departed, but the police remained on the scene. Renee took Ryan, the other twin, and asked Ada to accompany them. They followed the police, who escorted them to the hospital. During the drive, Renee called her husband and they met at the medical center. Shortly after, the doctors decided to airlift Kyle to the Dallas Children's Hospital via helicopter. The Lazarchuks returned home, leaving Ada to care for Ryan, before heading to the Dallas Children's Hospital. Ada requested they keep her updated about Kyle's condition. Renee worried Ada might be too nervous to care for Ryan, so she called a friend to help at the house. Her friend arrived to find Ada upset, tearful, and concerned about Kyle's fall. Ada explained that Kyle suddenly fell, and she'd tried to revive him with CPR. She repeatedly expressed her love for Kyle, insisting she'd never harm him. At the Dallas Children's Hospital, the Lazarchik family received devastating news about Kyle's condition. The doctor in charge reported that Kyle had suffered severe head injuries, including multiple bruises on his head, arm, and left shoulder. A neurosurgeon explained to Mike and Renee that urgent action was needed to relieve the pressure on Kyle's brain, but sadly, his survival was unlikely. A child abuse specialist also met with the parents and suggested that Kyle's injuries were consistent with abuse. The specialist emphasized that the injuries were extremely severe, equivalent to those sustained in a severe car accident or a fall from a 6th-floor height. Renee was stunned when she heard the news. At first, she suspected that Ada might have accidentally dropped the child or was too scared or ashamed to admit it. But the doctors clearly explained the severity of Kyle's head injuries, which required a significant amount of force to inflict. This made an accident seem highly unlikely. Renee quickly arranged for another friend to pick up her son, Brian, and take him away from the house. While this was happening at the hospital, Ada became increasingly agitated at home, repeatedly calling Renee's friend to ask about Kyle's condition. When Renee's friend stepped out to pick up her son from school, Ada called her multiple times, inquiring about Kyle. However, when Renee's friend returned to the house, Ada appeared calm, no longer crying or talking. Just then, a police car drove by the house. Upon seeing it, Ada became hysterical, crying uncontrollably and shouting, "No, no, no." She collapsed behind a door, repeatedly insisting that she would never harm Kyle. 2 female detectives arrived to question Ada, as she was the only adult present when the incident occurred, and had called 911 to report the injured child. As the detectives arrived at the house, they heard Ada's cries and got out of their patrol car. Inside, they found Ada extremely agitated. Once she calmed down, she explained that she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor to help him burp after a meal. When Kyle started vomiting, Ada went to the kitchen to get a container to catch the vomit, as Renee disliked stains on the floor. While she was away, Kyle turned blue, fell, and started convulsing. Ada claimed she then took him to the living room, called 911, and followed the dispatcher's instructions. During the interview, the other officer called the hospital to get an update on Kyle's condition. Upon learning the diagnosis, the detectives told Ada that her story didn't add up, given Kyle's injuries. Ada suggested that Kyle might have hit his head when he fell on the playroom floor after she left him alone, but the officers noted that the floor was covered with soft rugs, making this explanation unlikely. Ada then proposed that Kyle might have hit his head on the doorframe when she carried him on her hip. At the officer's request, Ada demonstrated how this could have happened, adding that Mike and Renee often bumped Kyle's head without any issues. The officer checked the spot where Ada claimed Kyle hit his head, but found no signs of a strong impact. When Ada was questioned by the officers, she claimed the injury to her son Kyle was a result of a strong impact when she was running with him in her arms. She denied ever shaking or hitting him or his twin. However, the officers remained skeptical, as the injury seemed inconsistent with Ada's story. They urged her to come clean, explaining that the truth could be crucial in saving Kyle's life. Despite their pleas, Ada refused to provide any further explanation. The officers reported the situation to their command and took Ada into custody for further questioning. Meanwhile, crime scene investigators arrived to process the house. After completing their work, they gave Renee's friend, who was staying at the house, the all clear to clean and organize the property in preparation for the family's return. As Renee's friend and several others cleaned the house, they stumbled upon a piece of adhesive tape sticking out from a cabinet door under the kitchen island. When they opened the door, they noticed it was broken, and held together by tape, causing it to become misaligned. They simply resecured it with the tape, but found it odd, as Renee was always meticulous about fixing broken items to prevent her children from getting hurt. Their curiosity piqued. They decided to report the discovery to the police. Shortly after, investigators returned to the scene to collect potential evidence. Later, when questioned about the cabinet door, Renee stated that she frequently used that door and had never seen it being held shut with adhesive tape before. By Friday, October 14th, all of Mike and Renee's hopes had been dashed. The doctors informed them that Kyle was clinically brain dead and had no chance of recovery. Amidst overwhelming grief and indescribable pain, the couple made the difficult decision to authorize the removal of life support. After which, Kyle sadly passed away 3 days later, on October 17th. The detectives questioned Ada, who was in prison on suspicion of premeditated assault on a minor. Ada claimed that on the day before the incident, she was preparing macaroni and cheese at Renee's request. According to Ada, Kyle was sitting on the kitchen counter, fell off, and hit his head hard on the kitchen floor. She picked him up, checked for injuries, and found only redness on his ear and the right side of his head. Ada applied cold compressors and gave him a pain reliever. When asked why she hadn't shared this with the other officers, Ada said she thought they wouldn't believe her. She didn't tell Renee because Renee had a severe headache when she got home from work and requested the lights be turned off and the house be kept quiet due to her migraines. The detectives asked if Ada had fallen with the child, which she strongly denied. During the interrogation, Ada discovered that Kyle had died and broke down in tears for the rest of the interview. The judge charged Ada with aggravated homicide and set bail at $715, an amount neither Ada nor her family could afford, so she remained in custody until the trial. The police hinted that they might charge her with premeditated actions, which could carry the death penalty. The 2005 trial of Kyle's death case heard testimony from the doctor who examined Kyle at Dallas Children's Hospital. The doctor reported that when Kyle arrived, he was already unconscious. Multiple bruises were found on the right side of his head, as well as on the left side of his head, shoulder, and both arms. 2 small hemorrhages forming hematomas were also discovered on the right temple. The doctor identified 3 main areas of hematomas on Kyle's head, indicating 3 separate impacts. The bruises were relatively recent, with one possibly 12 to 16 hours old. Internally, Kyle suffered from brain and retinal bleeding, consistent with severe trauma, and despite no broken bones, his brain tissue was significantly swollen, with an increased head pressure of 90 millimeters of mercury, far exceeding the normal 20 millimeters. Based on these findings, the doctor concluded that Kyle's injuries were consistent with severe blunt force trauma, likely caused by hitting his head against a hard object. The doctor suggested that such injuries could result from violently shaking and swinging a young child's head against a solid object, such as a kitchen cabinet door. A forensic expert from Dallas County testified about the autopsy results, which revealed multiple overlapping small bruises on Kyle's scalp, as well as a couple of small scrapes on his right temple, spaced over a centimeter apart. The autopsy also showed 4 or 5 pairs of similar injuries on his head. The brain had suffered significant bleeding and swelling, with bleeding in the retinas of both eyes, indicating that a substantial amount of force was required to cause such injuries. The expert concluded that Kyle's death was a result of severe head injuries caused by blunt force trauma, and agreed that it was possible that Kyle's head had been struck multiple times against the wooden door of the kitchen cabinet. The expert discounted the possibility that Kyle's injuries were caused by simply bumping into a door frame or falling from the kitchen counter. A forensic analyst provided crucial testimony, measuring the distance between the fasteners on the broken kitchen cabinet door and finding it consistent with the punctate abrasions on Kyle's head. This expert also examined the adhesive tape used to repair the cabinet door, uncovering 2 DNA traces. One of these traces had a significantly higher contribution and matched A's DNA, while the lesser trace remained unidentified. Next, Mike took the stand to testify. He recalled that Kyle was unharmed on the night of October 12th and the morning of October 13th, displaying no bruises. Mike explained that he had prepared breakfast that morning, opening and closing the kitchen cabinet doors to retrieve utensils and food, and verified that all doors were in perfect condition at the time, including the one that was later mysteriously repaired with tape. The parents shared that they had breakfast with the children and engaged in playful activities with the twins, who were crawling around a playhouse. Based on all the evidence, it's clear that Ada was the only adult in the house when the events leading to Kyle's death occurred. While the exact circumstances may never be known for certain, the prosecutor presented a possible scenario at trial. Kyle might have refused to eat his lunch, prompting Ada, who was distracted by watching a soap opera, to remove him from his high chair without noticing the open cabinet door. The prosecutor suggested that Ada's frustration or anger may have led her to attack Kyle's head with the cabinet door, which ultimately broke, leaving screw marks on the child. After all the testimonies and closing arguments, the jury went to deliberate. Upon returning, they found a Quadros guilty of capital murder of a child under 6 years old. As the verdict was read, Ada's mother, Elle Fernandez, who had traveled from Peru when her daughter was arrested, stood up and shouted that she would free because she was innocent. She proclaimed that there was no evidence to convict her daughter and vowed to start over an appeal. Kyle's parents shared photos and videos of their 14-month-old son, recounting his life from birth to days before his death. Family members spoke, while others cried. Sentenced to life without parole in 2006, Ada's family refused to give up, citing racial prejudice and poor defense. They sought appeal funding from Peru, U.S. communities, and solidarity groups. In prison, Ada consistently proclaimed her innocence and seized every opportunity to reiterate it in interviews. Her persistence eventually paid off when, in 2009, her lawyers filed an appeal, highlighting 5 specific mistakes made during the initial trial. The appeals court reviewed the case and dismissed 3 of the claims, but upheld 2. This was sufficient for the judges to quash the conviction and declare the trial null and void due to irregularities. In the aftermath of this ruling, Ada's family launched a new fundraising campaign to raise the $100,000 required to cover the costs of a new trial. It took 3 more years to prepare for the new trial, which finally began on July 10, 2012. The jury selection process started with over 100 candidates, and eventually, 12 jurors were chosen. The trial was held at Collin County's Justice Hall. The defense team argued that Kyle's head injury occurred on October 12th, when he fell from the kitchen counter. They claimed that the situation worsened the following day, when Ada accidentally hit Kyle's head on the door frame while carrying him in her arms. This time around, the defense presented a new piece of evidence. Testimony from a forensic expert with 40 years of experience. The expert suggested that some of Kyle's bruises might have been caused during his hospital stay, specifically when doctors inserted a catheter to assess brain swelling. However, the prosecution strongly disputed this new testimony. Additionally, David Gardner, an employee of the kitchen cabinet manufacturer, testified for the defense. He proposed alternative explanations for the broken cabinet door, although he didn't entirely rule out the possibility that Kyle's head could have been struck against it. A pivotal moment in the trial came when Mike took the stand, recounting the heartbreaking final 2 days of Kyle's life. Mike described how Kyle was hooked up to multiple tubes and machines, and ultimately being removed from life support, with his parents by his side as he passed away. The defense team insisted that there wasn't sufficient evidence to convict Ada, but the prosecution countered by emphasizing the medical findings and the numerous inconsistencies in Ada's story. Following the conclusion of the trial, the jury deliberated for 5 hours, even requesting to review the 911 call recordings once more. In the end, they delivered a verdict. Ada Quadros, aged 33 at the time, was guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In prison, Ada occupied herself by joining the volleyball team, learning Braille, and entering an art competition in which she won with a portrait of the Virgin Mary. She sold her winning artwork to raise money for a new appeal. Despite being behind bars, Ada remains adamant that she is innocent, and her spirit remains unbroken. From her cell, she and her family persist in their efforts to secure an appeal, hoping to prove what they believe to be the truth. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, Mexico. She was the second of 3 children to parents Maria del Sacramento Saganon and Manuel Perez. Raised alongside her older brother Javier and younger sister Ana, the family lived modestly, but provided their children with a good education and motivated them to aspire to a better life. Abril excelled in school, showed a talent for mathematics and entrepreneurial skills, and dreamed of obtaining a high-quality higher education to secure a well-paying job with career advancement opportunities. After finishing high school, Abril was admitted to the most prestigious university in Nuevo León, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Upon graduating, she was hired in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. A few years later, she ventured into digital sales and quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and steadily advancing towards the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, supported her family, and was full of plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unsettled, which disappointed her loved ones. Nevertheless, she was confident she would find true love and live a long, happy life. Little did Abril know how her marriage to the perfect man would turn out. Abril met Juan Carlos in the mid-1990s, when her career was taking off. They were both ambitious, which created a strong connection between them. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, kindness, and intelligence, while she was drawn to his sharp intellect and determination. As their companies collaborated on projects, they crossed paths several times, eventually leading Juan Carlos to realize he was in love with Abril. Through mutual acquaintances, he obtained her phone number and asked her out on a date. The feelings were mutual, and their relationship developed quickly. By 1998, they decided to formalize their relationship with a wedding. By then, they had both achieved considerable career success and were involved in developing online stores, which showed great promise. Their life resembled a true fairy tale, evoking envy and admiration among their peers. After 3 years of marriage, Abril gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they had a son named Juan Carlos Jr., and another 2 years after that, they welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andreas. Despite having 3 young children, Abril managed to balance her parental responsibilities with her career advancement, barely taking any maternity leave. From the outside, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, and happy. However, appearances were deceiving. Behind closed doors, Juan Carlos showed his true nature, being hot-tempered, aggressive, and harsh. He was intolerant of compromise, insisting that everything had to be exactly as he wanted. Over time, his behavior worsened, and verbal altercations escalated into physical confrontations. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan Carlos briefly softened, trying to control his emotions, but it didn't last long. By the time the third child was born, he no longer even tried to be a good father or husband. He would vent his anger on Abril, insulting and belittling her, and her tears seemed to lift his spirits. He regularly physically harmed her, often in ways that left no visible marks on her body, so she could hide the bruises under clothing or mask them with makeup. All this was done to protect his flawless reputation and pride himself on being a model family man, loving husband and father. Abril kept silent for years, trying not to tell even her sister and mother about the ongoing nightmare. She earned well and could have raised the children on her own. But her husband was a wealthy and influential man who could easily take the children away from her through the courts. By 2010, the ideal family facade had begun to crumble, and those who once admired them started to suspect that something was terribly wrong behind closed doors. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed, visibly thin, sleeping poorly, and frequently sporting bruises on her face and body that became increasingly difficult to conceal. In public, Juan Carlos maintained a calm and confident demeanor, pretending that nothing was amiss, playing the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with his wife politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a monster, making it increasingly dangerous for Abril to be near him. Despite pleas from loved ones to divorce him, Abril stubbornly insisted that everything was fine and that she would handle the problems with her husband herself. In 2014, Juan Carlos's career reached its peak when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in the field. After this promotion, the family moved to Mexico City, settling in a large house in one of the capital's best neighborhoods. Their children attended an elite private school, and Abril sincerely hoped that the move would positively affect their relationship. Contrary to expectations, the change only made Juan Carlos continue to physically harm and insult his wife, even doing so in front of their children. He began to groundlessly accuse her of infidelity, and whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to using his fists. He monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and later even hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage, despite her husband's behavior becoming utterly unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare that outwardly seemed like a happy and successful union, with many even envying her for having a prominent, influential, wealthy, and seemingly caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family traveled to Monterrey to celebrate Catholic Christmas with the Perez family. However, Juan Carlos behaved towards his wife as he was accustomed, not shying away from her parents, who were horrified by what they witnessed. At that moment, Abril realized things could not continue this way and informed her husband that she would file for divorce once they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos flew into a rage, grabbing her throat and squeezing so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Only her mother, Maria del Soro, entering the room and raising the alarm prevented a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce, moving from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not save her from her tyrannical husband. On the morning of January 4th, while she was still asleep, Juan Carlos entered the bedroom holding a baseball bat, striking her hard on the head and attempting to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but managed to slip off the bed just in time, literally saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body while the eldest son took the bat from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed Abril with a serious concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow, requiring stitches. As soon as his wife and sons left the home, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to explain the situation and asked for help in resolving it. He also posted on his social media page, claiming that his wife had betrayed him, was unfaithful, and intended to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to take all their jointly acquired assets. Moreover, he claimed that his wife had stolen all the money from their home safe, and that when he tried to stop her, she injured him with a knife in the shoulder. As proof of his innocence, Sanchez shared photos of a bloody knife and stains on the floor, but these were later revealed to be fake. The blood was from Abril's own room, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite this, His friends believed him and shared his story on social media, sparking widespread outrage. Meanwhile, Abril had filed a police report against Sanchez, accusing him of attempting to kill her. After being released from the hospital, she moved out of their home with their sons and was granted temporary custody. Their adult daughter, who was in college, also sided with her mother and condemned her father's behavior. Sanchez was ordered to pay a small amount of alimony to Abril and their sons, but he disagreed with the amount. He faced a potential prison sentence, but as an influential businessman, he was confident he would avoid punishment. Abril returned to her parents' home in Monterey, where she filed for divorce and began offering online consultations to women in similar situations. She planned to open a center for psychological and legal assistance for victims of domestic violence. 8.5 months after the incident, Sanchez was finally arrested and charged with femicide, bodily harm, and attempted murder. He was jailed for over a month, but managed to appeal the pretrial detention decision and was released. During the trial, crucial evidence, including hospital photographs and medical records, was not presented. The judge deemed the testimonies of Abril and her sons insufficient and released Sanchez, stating that his actions did not pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and frightened by the verdict, realizing that her ex-husband had used his connections to secure his release. She sent an official letter to the judge expressing fear for her life, but it had no impact. Immediately after being released, Sanchez began legal proceedings against Abril for custody of their sons, forcing her to return to Mexico City for court sessions. Abril arrived in Mexico City with her children on November 25th, fearing for their safety after a court session. As they drove to the airport, a motorcyclist stopped at a traffic light, pulled out a handgun, and fired twice at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. One bullet grazed their younger son, but none of the children were seriously hurt. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life for over 6 hours. But unfortunately, she died that evening due to severe injuries and significant blood loss. Abril's family, convinced that her ex-husband Juan Carlos was behind the brutal act, urged authorities to arrest him. However, law enforcement stated that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to discuss motives and couldn't claim that it was a hitman sent by Sanchez. The case was not classified as femicide until further investigation, and Juan Carlos remained free. After Abril's death, her children were placed in the care of their maternal relatives, while their father, Juan Carlos Sanchez, prepared to fight for custody in court. Sanchez's soon-to-be ex-wife's sister wrote an angry social media post blaming him for the incident, but her page was quickly blocked and later deleted. Despite this, the family decided to draw public attention to the case. The attack on Abril, which occurred on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence, sparked widespread outrage. People began sharing numerous cases where men had attempted to kill women but were not punished. As a result, the General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into Sanchez and instructed investigators to review the judge's decisions to release him. The judges involved in Sanchez's case were temporarily suspended and later removed from their positions. Mexican politician and women's rights defender Claudia Sheinbaum Parro confirmed that Abril's case had been reclassified as femicide and would be reinvestigated. The judges who had released Sanchez could face consequences for Abril's death if his guilt was proven. Sanchez posted on social media, calling for the perpetrator of his ex-wife's death to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. However, his daughter Ana Cecilia left an angry comment, accusing her father of cruelty and sharing photos of her mother taken in the hospital after Sanchez had attacked her with a bat. Despite the media attention, Sanchez was initially left free under a restraining order, required to check in weekly at a police station. However, after he failed to appear, a warrant for his arrest was issued. He used his resources and connections to flee the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Sanchez as a fugitive accused of a serious crime. and he was declared wanted worldwide. An investigation was launched to find the hitman who killed Abril. Street camera footage revealed 2 cars following her vehicle as she left the courthouse with her children and lawyer. The motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone, but received instructions from individuals in the cars. It took investigators several months to identify some of the participants, and 2 suspects were finally arrested on March 5, 2020. Surprisingly, they did not resist arrest and began cooperating with authorities, hoping to reduce their sentences. It was confirmed that Sanchez was the mastermind behind the crime, having paid a substantial sum to 7 individuals involved in the act. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the chase cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. Juan Carlos, while in prison, had hired 2 experienced criminals to be his personal bodyguards. After they were released, he rehired them to find people to kill Abril, promising each a large sum of money if they succeeded. Once he had assembled a team, Juan Carlos paid them the promised money and gave them detailed instructions about Abril's route and vehicle. The toughest part was luring Abril to Mexico City, which he achieved by threatening to take her children if she didn't appear in court. Abril showed up in court as planned, but intended to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan Carlos knew this through his connections, but it wasn't until the end of October 2020 that 3 more people involved in the conspiracy were arrested on suspicion of drug distribution. It was later discovered that they were involved in Abril's murder. All the arrested individuals were part of Juan Maldonado's gang, known as Juan Balto, which had protected Sanchez while he was in prison. Maldonado agreed to help kill Abril in exchange for a large reward. He was arrested in November 2020 and began cooperating, confirming that Juan Carlos had hired people to kill Abril. With this new evidence, it was clear that Sanchez was both the client and organizer of the crime. His previous assault on Abril with a bat was reclassified as an attempted murder, leading the court to issue an arrest warrant for him on charges of femicide. By spring 2021, all the participants in the crime had been caught, except for Sanchez, who remained at large. The weapon used in the murder was also found. In total, 9 people from the same criminal group were detained, 7 of whom were directly involved in chasing and shooting Abril. 5 years after Abril's death, Sanchez, the mastermind of the crime, is still on the run, and his whereabouts remain unknown. The person who pulled the trigger was sentenced to 52 years in prison, while 2 others involved in the crime received 50-year sentences each. The other participants are still under investigation, and their fate has yet to be decided. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Rihanna. Michael grew up in a close-knit family with caring and loving parents who worked hard to provide a decent life for their children. His father was an entrepreneur, and his mother created a nurturing atmosphere at home that encouraged the growth and development of their kids. Michael was a sociable and kind person who did well in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which gave him confidence and resilience. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a profession that offered good earnings and promising job prospects. He worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison. In 2011, at the age of 23, Michael decided to register on a dating site to distract himself from a recent breakup and meet new people. That's when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling girl who shared his interests. They both disliked loud parties and wanted to find true love and build a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to have found a suitable match online. On April 2nd, he excitedly told his mother that he had a date and was busy preparing for it. He even withdrew 3,000 rand from his account to impress the girl. However, He was uneasy about the unusual meeting spot his friend had chosen, the city cemetery, and didn't mention it to his parents. At around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house, getting into his silver Peugeot 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age. When he arrived at the cemetery, the girl was running a bit late, but she looked stunning in a white dress and greeted him with a smile. They chatted comfortably, and she suggested they head to a more secluded area of the cemetery. There, they found a romantic setup, a blanket and a basket of fruit and wine. After having a glass of wine, the girl suddenly kissed Michael. But the pleasant feeling quickly turned to pain and horror as he realized he had fallen into a sinister trap. Chana Van Haren was born in 1991, a time of crisis for her parents. Her mother's pregnancy prompted the couple to put their divorce on hold and try to salvage their relationship. However, their efforts ultimately failed, and their home life continued to deteriorate. Chana's mother made no effort to hide her resentment towards her daughter, viewing her as an unwanted reminder of her husband. After the divorce, Chana's mother took the children and left their father behind. Chana suffered from a severe lack of love and attention from her mother, feeling lonely and misunderstood. Among her siblings, Chana struggled the most, growing increasingly withdrawn and sullen from a young age. She exhibited disturbing behaviors, such as talking about death and creating disturbing drawings. Her grandparents, alarmed by her behavior, suspected supernatural influence and took her to church, where she was subjected to an exorcism ritual. Chana's mental health declined as she got older. At 10, she had a disturbing incident where she threatened a house guest with a knife, prompting her family to seek professional psychiatric help. Fortunately, the medication improved her mood, and her father made an effort to spend quality time with her, even taking her on hunting trips. However, Chana later revealed that she found pleasure in harming animals, often bringing home dead creatures. When Chana turned 12, she formed a problematic friendship with an older man who introduced her to harmful substances and took advantage of her vulnerability. 2 years later, her mother moved to New Zealand, leaving Chana and her siblings in the care of their father and stepmother. At 15, Chana became involved with a 22-year-old man who had an unhealthy interest in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. Fortunately, by her 17th birthday, Chana's life started to take a positive turn. She distanced herself from harmful relationships, successfully graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. After abandoning her interest in Satanism and ceasing to use harmful substances, Chana's emotional well-being significantly improved. She excelled in her studies and eventually secured a job in her chosen field. Chana's new job provided her with a supportive community, including her colleagues and management, where she discovered her talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition. She also started dating Warren, giving the impression to outsiders, including her family and close friends, that her life was back on track. However, beneath the surface, her inner struggles persisted. Her father was especially relieved, hoping she had finally grown up and would soon get married. But an unexpected obstacle emerged, threatening to disrupt her newfound stability. Warren's friend Roy, who claimed to be highly sensitive, sensed a dark and malevolent presence in Chana, despite her kind and friendly nature. His concerns were dismissed due to the contrast between his perceptions and her outward appearance. One day, Roy approached Chana, asking about Norman, a name that kept appearing in his mind, implying she might be unfaithful to Warren. Chana's response was shocking. She spat in his face and demanded he stop questioning her. Chana's friend, Norman, was later revealed to be the name of her imaginary childhood friend, Zazzle. This discovery changed the dynamics among their group of friends. At a party, Chana became interested in 24-year-old Martin. Martin came from a respected and wealthy family, unlike Chana. He had a good relationship with both his parents and was smart, well-mannered, and performed well in school. However, Martin had been struggling with a mental illness since he was 6 years old. He started having hallucinations, claiming that an entity appeared to him, making him believe he had incredible strength. As Martin grew older, his mental condition worsened, leading to problems at school and home. At 14, he was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Although conventional treatment didn't work, his family and doctors eventually found the right medication to control his condition, except for occasional outbursts of aggression. Chana and Martin, two unstable young individuals, started a romantic relationship. Despite their outward appearance of happiness, their parents were oblivious to the issues the couple had faced in the past. As their relationship progressed, it ultimately led to devastating consequences. At first, the couple was social and outgoing, attending parties and interacting with others. Friends recalled noticing cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. However, as time passed, Chana and Martin began to withdraw from their social circle and developed an interest in dark practices, including Satanism, voodoo, and occult rituals. This fascination eventually extended to infamous serial killers. In 2011, Martins posted a photo with his girlfriend Chana on social media, captioned "Killers" with an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took the post seriously. However, unbeknownst to others, the couple had dark fantasies that eventually turned into a sinister plan. They wanted to torture and kill homeless people, and even practiced on animals. But their plan was put on hold, as they couldn't find a suitable victim. Chana created a profile on a dating site and caught the attention of Michael Van Eck. The couple targeted him for their twisted plan, and Chana suggested they meet in person. Michael agreed, despite the unusual meeting location. Chana and Martins carefully prepared for the date, planning every detail, including what to wear and how to end Michael's life. Chana approached the meeting fully prepared, and the trap was set. Michael fell for the bait, and Martins attacked him from behind with a knife. Despite being stabbed around 30 times, Michael resisted, which caught the attackers off guard. Chana intervened, and together, they overwhelmed Michael, who begged them to end his suffering. After the attack, Martins slit his own throat, and the couple began to dismember Michael's body. They severed his legs and decapitated him, placing the body parts in bags. They buried the body in a shallow grave, but couldn't make it deep enough due to lacking shovels. They then left the scene with the body parts using Michael's car, which they later abandoned in a troubled neighborhood. The next day, a cemetery worker discovered the grave and alerted the authorities. Meanwhile, Michael's parents were frantically searching for him, and his workplace reported him missing. The police found Michael's car, which led them to the cemetery, where they uncovered the gruesome crime scene. The local police were already investigating a mysterious body found on the cemetery grounds, with all signs pointing to foul play. They brought Michael Van Eck's family into the picture, as he had gone missing a day earlier. At the cemetery, Michael's mother identified her son's body by recognizing his personal belongings and distinctive childhood burn scars. The autopsy revealed that Michael had suffered multiple knife wounds and signs of struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, with a level of professional precision suggesting the perpetrators had experience with such acts. The evidence pointed to multiple attackers being involved, given the number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to overpower the victim. DNA testing confirmed the body was 23-year-old Michael Van Eck. During the investigation, police seized Michael's phone and computer, tracing his last communication to Chav Van Haan, who had invited him to the cemetery on the fateful night. When questioned, Chav and her boyfriend Martin confessed to their involvement in the murder. Chav's father was shocked by her calm and defiant confession, in which she claimed to have dreamed of committing such a crime since she started hunting with him. The lack of remorse from the couple shocked everyone, and they seemed to relish the public attention. They had planned to take their own lives if caught, but later changed their minds, wanting to live the life of monsters. The police search of the couple's apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were covered in distorted portraits of Chav, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears in various guises. The police found disturbing evidence in the rooms, including ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and unknown objects. They also discovered the belongings of the murdered him, including his glasses and wallet. Martins later admitted that they took the victim's money to fund their next crime. The most shocking discovery, however, was made in the refrigerator. The police found the victim's head with his mouth sewn shut, which suggested that the couple planned to use it as a ritual bowl. Additionally, the victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. The police also found the victim's hand and leg buried near the murderer's home, along with the bodies of several animals. The girl's diary revealed her dark thoughts and plans. The evidence suggested that the couple derived pleasure from taking lives and mutilating bodies. Both Martins and Chana underwent mental evaluations, and the commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and desired the consequences. In November 2011, Chana stood trial as a serial offender, despite it being a single incident. She openly admitted that she did not feel remorse and desired to repeat her actions. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chana with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, making her a more dangerous individual. Throughout the trial, she remained emotionless. Chana was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without parole, with 20 years for murder and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martins defended himself in court, claiming that he did not remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, which he believed pushed him and Chana to commit the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his apology sounded insincere. He implied that the victim was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, when in reality, the couple had lured him into a premeditated trap. Michael's mother was overcome with grief and struck Martins during one of the sessions. In the end, Martins was also found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half of his sentence. After 2014, Chana and her lover Martins maintained a relationship through letters while he was in prison. In these letters, Martins referred to Chana as a dark goddess and wrote poetic phrases such as, "When you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out, and they fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison." However, over time, Chana ended the relationship, feeling that they had become emotionally disconnected from each other. While in prison, Chana exhibited exemplary behavior, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Some collectors, fascinated by notorious criminals, paid large sums for a photograph of Chana with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. Martins also attracted a following, with a fan club that was monitored by the police for a long time to prevent his followers from emulating his violent actions. Despite his circumstances, Martins continued to receive therapy and completed his education through correspondence courses. Ultimately, the case highlights how two unstable individuals, driven by their desires and lacking boundaries, can destroy an innocent life. Furthermore, it reveals how some people, often hiding behind a seemingly normal facade, can harbor dark and sinister intentions. Unfortunately, new acquaintances can sometimes have a profoundly negative impact on our lives, marking a point of no return. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Adam Strong. Adam Strong was born in 1972 in Cornwall, Ontario, Canada. Very little is known about his family and upbringing. He never got married and didn't have any children. Strong worked at a local gas station and also as a security guard on a movie set. People who knew him described him as eccentric and arrogant, believing he was smarter than others. He enjoyed arguing and trying to prove his point until others agreed, but he wasn't typically aggressive. On September 11, 2017, a fisherman in Oshawa, Ontario, made a disturbing discovery in the city harbor. He found a badly disfigured and decomposed human torso floating in the water. The fisherman immediately reported his finding to the police, who retrieved the remains and sent them to forensics for analysis. Due to the body's severe decomposition, experts had a hard time identifying it. The torso was missing limbs and a head, and its internal organs were gone. The only clues about the victim were that she was a young woman between 18 and 25 years old. Her fingerprints, dental records, and distinguishing features couldn't be used for identification. A partial tattoo on her neck was visible, but its design was impossible to determine due to decomposition. As a result, a DNA analysis was the only remaining option, but no matches were found in the existing database. The police then began investigating cases of young women who had gone missing in recent months. In November 2017, nearly 2 months after the discovery, authorities identified the body as 18-year-old Rory Rush, a high school student who had vanished in mid-August. She was several weeks pregnant at the time of her disappearance. Divers searched the harbor and nearby Lake Ontario shoreline, but no other body parts were found. The time and cause of death remained unknown. Experts examined the body and found numerous severe injuries inflicted while Rory was still alive, suggesting she had been tortured over a long period before her death. This discovery led to a major breakthrough in the investigation. 4 months later, an unexpected twist emerged. In December, the Wood family moved into a house at 19 McMillan Drive, Oshawa, where they noticed an unpleasant smell. Their downstairs neighbor, 45-year-old Adam Strong, assured them it was just a minor plumbing issue that he would fix soon. The neighbor tried to be friendly and polite, but there was something unsettling about him. When David's wife tried to welcome him with homemade cookies, he refused to let her enter his apartment, instead stepping out into the hallway and quickly closing the door behind him. In that brief moment, she caught a glimpse of his living space, which was in disarray, and was overwhelmed by the foul smell inside. Adam took the cookies, thanked the neighbor, and quickly excused himself. Later, when they crossed paths in the yard, he apologized for not inviting her in, explaining that he was about to start renovations, and his apartment was not presentable at the time. Despite his polite demeanor, he seemed visibly nervous. As the Wood family settled into their new home, they tried to ignore the unbearable smell. However, on December 29th, they finally called a plumber to investigate a sewer blockage, which had intensified the stench. Although the issue seemed minor and easily solvable, the discovery the workers made in the pipes was shocking. Even to experienced forensic experts, human body parts had been found. Sean Fenn, a plumber, and his partner were called to the Wood family's apartment to fix a clogged refrigerator drain. However, when they arrived, they were met with an overwhelming stench, which they soon discovered was coming from the apartment below, belonging to Adam Strong. Upon entering Strong's apartment, the smell intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Sean, an experienced plumber, had never encountered anything so foul-smelling in his career. While working to clear the pipe, Strong's behavior became increasingly strange and nervous. He refused to leave the area, constantly asking questions about the process. The plumbers tried to ignore Strong's antics, but what they discovered next would be shocking. As they extracted the blockage, they found over 10 kilograms of entangled flesh, hair, and bone fragments, including disfigured human fingers. Strong remained surprisingly calm, asking how the remains ended up in the pipe. Fenn immediately called the police, suspecting they had stumbled upon human remains in the pipes. When the police arrived, they confirmed the discovery of human flesh. Instead of denying the allegations, Strong calmly admitted that Rory Rush's body parts were stuck in the pipe, with additional remains stored in his freezer. A search of the freezer revealed a severed head, limb fragments, and more, all packed in plastic bags. The apartment was in disarray, with dirty dishes, rotting food, trash, and empty pizza boxes littering the floor. The police also found numerous adult magazines with sadistic content, as well as intimate toys, gags, whips, handcuffs, and devices for binding and hanging, suggesting a disturbing atmosphere. Adams' social media profiles openly displayed his interest in BDSM practices, with explicit photos and videos. Although he didn't have a long-term partner, several former partners accused him of being abusive, leading to their breakups. He wrote reviews of adult films and magazines, indicating he spent most of his free time consuming such content. Behind his calm exterior, he led a secretive life. The police cordoned off Adams' residence, treating it as a crime scene. The initial investigation suggested that they had a lot of work ahead, with potential discoveries that could be just as shocking as the head found in the refrigerator. Notably, the evidence found led investigators to suspect that the discovered body parts belonged to Rory Hash, whose torso was found in a water body 4 months earlier. A distinctive tattoo on the neck and DNA analysis supported this theory. In Adams' house, investigators found disturbing evidence of a gruesome crime. Hidden among piles of trash were the blood-stained clothes and shoes of Rory Rush, later confirmed to be the missing schoolgirl. The bedroom, where her bed was found, was covered in her blood, with splatters on the walls, furniture, and ceiling. A dissection table was found in the kitchen, suggesting that the suspect had dismembered and gutted the girl there. The entire area was contaminated with blood, skin particles, hair, and bone fragments. The bathroom was equally appalling, with dirt, blood, and signs of brutal acts everywhere. It appeared that Adam had attempted to dispose of the body by flushing it down the toilet in parts, but when this failed, he tried to fix the blockage himself. A large collection of sharp weapons was also found in the house, likely used to dismember the girl's body. Rory Hash was born in 1999 to a single mother, Shannon Dion. Despite her father's absence, Rory grew up in a loving environment. Thanks to her mother and grandmother, her family had a unique background, with her maternal grandfather founding a motorcycle club and being a skilled boxer with ties to the criminal underworld. Rory had a peaceful and carefree childhood, excelled in dance, and was an award-winning student. At 13, she received an award as the Best Cadet of the Year in her local army unit. However, her life took a dramatic turn at 15 when she got introduced to drugs by a friend and became dependent. She began associating with questionable individuals, neglected her studies, and eventually stopped attending school altogether. For about a year, Rory's family tried to get her help for her addiction, but she would relapse every time. At 17, she ran away from home and turned to prostitution to support her drug habit. Then, her mother got her into a specialized program for teenagers with addictions, which forced her into treatment. This time, the efforts paid off, and Rory was able to get back on track. She got a job, studied remotely, and eventually earned her high school diploma. She started planning for college and began a serious relationship with a boy named Anthony. In June 2017, Rory told her mother that she was pregnant and planned to keep the baby. However, Rory's mother didn't know that her daughter had started using drugs again. Rory met with Constable Christopher Crane at a shopping center in mid-August. He had been monitoring her for 18 months to keep her away from negative influences. During their meeting, Rory confessed that she had started using drugs again and lost her job a month prior, often exchanging sexual favors for money or drugs. Constable Crane was deeply disturbed by her revelation and promised to help. He stepped away to make an urgent call to arrange for her hospitalization. However, when he returned, Rory was gone, and the constable was unable to find her. The next day, Rory's mother and uncle took her to the hospital after finding her incoherent due to substance use. They left her in the emergency room queue and stepped out for about an hour. When they returned, they were shocked to discover that Rory had vanished, and sadly, she was never seen alive again. A review of hospital surveillance footage showed that Rory simply got up and left the hospital on her own. Her family reported her missing the next day, but despite an extensive search effort and widespread social media attention, no one was able to find her. It's likely that her addiction led her to seek out drugs at Strong's house, where she may have exchanged sexual favors for them. After Adam alerted the police to the location of the remaining body parts, an investigation was launched. Investigators expected him to cooperate, but instead, he became unresponsive and refused to answer questions at the police station. He remained calm and denied any wrongdoing. Because there was no direct evidence linking him to the girl's murder, Adam was only charged with desecrating a body. His lawyer's efforts to secure bail were unsuccessful, and he was held in jail awaiting trial. The investigators struggled to find an effective approach to questioning him, trying to elicit an emotional response that might provoke a confession. Strong was evasive when questioned about Rory's presence in his house and what he did to her, but openly discussed his fondness for bladed weapons and extensive knife collection. A thorough search of Adam's house uncovered a dirty hunting knife with dried skin fragments that appeared human in a hidden closet. Although the DNA from the knife didn't match Rory's, it belonged to another individual. It took several months to identify the owner of the DNA, but by July 2017, it was established that the traces on the weapon belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, Rory Rush, who had vanished about 10 years prior. Candace Fitzpatrick shared similarities with Rory. Both struggled with substance abuse and legal issues, grew up in troubled families, and had a history of running away from home for months at a time. To survive, she would live with acquaintances and exchange sex for food and drugs. Born in 1989, Candace was 18 when she disappeared. Her family didn't notice her absence initially, and only reported her missing almost 2 years later, by which time all leads had gone cold. Candace's life and social circle led many to believe she could have ended up anywhere. Her parents thought she had run away and held on to the hope that she would return. However, in 2018, the news from law enforcement crushed their hopes of ever seeing their daughter alive again. It's worth noting that both victims of the suspect were the same age and looked almost identical, like sisters. This led people to believe that the police had caught a serial predator. When questioned about the second woman, the suspect Adam unexpectedly agreed to cooperate in exchange for better living conditions. He wanted a private cell, a large TV, internet access, and specific meals. Law enforcement officials were outraged by his demands, but they relented to get the information. Adam began his story by talking about his difficult childhood, including how he was abused by his stepfather from the age of 5. He also described how he started torturing and killing animals from the age of 7, finding physical pleasure in these acts. When the conversation turned to Rory, Adam Strong described in detail how he had dismembered her, seemingly taking pleasure in it, but claiming he only did so because she had died from an overdose. However, the police did not believe him, and he was unable to convince them of his story. When questioned about Candace, who had disappeared 10 years prior, Strong was surprised the police knew about her. He tried to find out how they had discovered his secret, and when told about human flesh stuck to an old knife, he became somber and regretful for not taking better precautions to cover his tracks. Strong admitted to meeting Candace, but denied killing her. However, the evidence gathered did not support his claim. In an attempt to gain sympathy, he inadvertently incriminated himself. The police informed him that Rory was pregnant at the time of her death, which Strong vehemently denied. The detectives realized that Strong would argue endlessly to prove his point, so they decided to provoke him into revealing more than he intended. They insisted that the victim was pregnant, and Strong, trying to prove otherwise, described in detail how he had examined Rory's reproductive organs and felt a pulsation, leading the police to believe that she might have still been alive during the attack. Later, Strong tried to deny everything, but his statements had been recorded on camera and were presented in court. He refused to disclose what he had done with Candace's body, and her remains were never found. The detectives were unable to learn about any other possible victims. During one of the last interrogations, Strong callously stated that he would like his condolences to be passed on to Rory's parents. At the trial, his lawyers argued that Strong was mentally ill and unable to be held responsible for his actions. However, a psychiatric evaluation determined that despite certain disorders, Strong was aware of his actions and could be held legally accountable. The trial began in September 2020, 3 years after Rory's death and 12 years after Candace's disappearance. Strong was charged with 2 counts of murder and desecration of Rory's remains. Although he never admitted his guilt, the evidence and his confessions left no doubt about his involvement in the heinous crimes. 4 of Strong's former partners also testified, describing his cruelty and violent tendencies. According to the prosecution, Strong had lured both women to his home, promising them money for intimate services, and then killed them. Adam Strong brutally murdered his victim, subjecting her to a prolonged and agonizing ordeal. He likely killed her out of fear that she would report him to the authorities. On September 4th, his mobile phone signal was detected near the city harbor, where he had dumped the victim's torso, hoping the current would carry it away. In April 2021, Adam Strong was convicted of murdering Candace Fitzpatrick and Rory Hash, as well as desecrating Hash's remains. He received a life sentence without parole. However, Strong showed no remorse, stating in his final remarks that his prison cell was an improvement over his previous living conditions. 6 months into his sentence, Strong unexpectedly revealed the location of his first victim's remains. The police followed his directions, and after several months of searching, they discovered human bones. DNA testing confirmed that the skeleton belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, which was officially announced. Investigators believe that there may be additional victims in the Adam Strong case, possibly including at least one more woman. Notably, when Strong was initially arrested, his personal belongings were confiscated, including a chain with 3 rings. He later requested the items return, stating that the rings held sentimental value. Relatives of Rory and Candace later identified 2 of the rings as belonging to their daughters. However, the 3rd ring remains unidentified, sparking speculation about potential additional victims. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Adrienne Jones. Adrienne Jessica Jones was a bright light in Mansfield in 1995. As a 16-year-old junior at Mansfield High School, she captivated everyone with her beauty, exceptional qualities, and impressive achievements. Adrienne was an outstanding student, consistently excelling in advanced honors courses and demonstrating a strong work ethic. She spent at least 2 hours each night studying to ensure her success, which earned her high grades. Her kindness, intelligence, and infectious spirit made her a role model and a beloved figure among her classmates and teachers. In addition to her academic prowess, Adrienne was a talented athlete. She was a dedicated member of the girls' soccer team, showcasing remarkable skill and dedication on the field. After graduating from Mansfield High School, Adrienne's dream was to become a veterinarian and help animals. After a game injury forced her to temporarily leave her team, Adrienne didn't give up on sports. Instead, she joined the girls' cross-country team, which allowed her to stay active and improve her fitness. She threw herself into the new challenge, working hard to get in shape. Her dedication paid off, and she soon became a key member of the cross-country team. In addition to her academic and athletic pursuits, Adrienne also held down a part-time job, working 20 hours a week at a local fast food restaurant, Golden Fried Chicken. Despite her busy schedule, Adrienne enjoyed being the center of attention, particularly from teenage boys in Mansfield. Her friends would even describe her as a bit of a flirt. She took great care in her appearance, spending at least 2 hours each day on her makeup to ensure she looked perfect. Adrienne, like many teenagers, often tested the limits set by her parents. Despite her good nature, her parents were particularly protective of her due to the changing environment in Mansfield, where crime was on the rise. They implemented a strict 9 p.m. curfew on weekends to ensure her safety, requiring her to provide proof of her activities, such as ticket stubs, if she wanted to stay out later. To prevent her from sneaking out, Her father also nailed her bedroom window shut. Although Adrienne occasionally disobeyed her parents and left the house at night to meet her friends, on Sunday, December 3rd, 1995, she was given special permission to stay up late to talk to her boyfriend, Tracy Smith, who was out of town with his parents. During their phone conversation, Adrienne's mother overheard her mention that another call was coming in. When asked about the caller's identity, Adrienne said it was David from her cross-country team, who seemed upset about something. Adrienne's family started their day as usual the next morning, but her mother's concern grew when she heard Adrienne's alarm still going off in her bedroom. When she went to check on her, she discovered that Adrienne was missing, and her bed had not been slept in. Despite trying to stay calm, Adrienne's mother quickly became worried. She initially thought Adrienne might have gone for an early morning run, but this idea was quickly dismissed when she saw Adrienne's running shoes still on the floor. In the past, Adrienne had occasionally sneaked out at night to meet friends, but she had always returned home by morning, making her mother even more worried about her disappearance. Worried about Adrienne, her parents contacted the police. Unbeknownst to them, a shocking discovery was made on a farm several miles away. At around 7 a.m., on Seton Road in Grand Prairie, Texas, a man was on his way to check his mailbox when he noticed that the gate to his property had been knocked down. Curious, he entered his farm and was met with an unsettling scene. Initially, the man thought he was looking at roadkill, but as he got closer, he realized it was a lifeless teenage girl lying on the ground. The man immediately called the police, who arrived to find a disturbing sight. The teenager had been shot execution style, with 2 bullet wounds on her left cheek and forehead. In addition to these gunshot wounds, her head had suffered severe injuries. Moreover, her arms and legs were covered in scrapes and bruises, indicating that she had run through the farm's barbed wire gate. A teenager's violent murder sparked a desperate investigation. The fact that she was found in her nightclothes suggested she had been preparing for bed when her life was brutally cut short. The execution-style killing led police to consider possible links to gang violence or drugs. After discovering the body on the farm, the Grand Prairie Police immediately alerted all nearby agencies, sending out a detailed description of the victim, including her age, height, weight, and other physical characteristics. They hoped that another agency might recognize the description and make a connection to a missing person. It wasn't long before the Mansfield police got in touch with Grand Prairie officers, having made a match. The Mansfield police identified the murdered teenager as Adrienne Jones. With the victim identified, the police had the heartbreaking task of informing Adrienne's parents about her tragic death. When they broke the news to her mother, she was overcome with grief. In the small town of Mansfield, news of Adrienne's murder spread quickly through her high school, leaving her classmates and friends devastated. Classes were interrupted as the news traveled through the halls, and students tearfully consoled one another. The town was on high alert following the discovery of Adrienne's body in a field, with rumors and theories circulating about her death. One theory was that Adrienne was involved in drugs, while others suspected a serial killer might be living among them. Adrienne's parents cooperated with the police, providing information about the last time they saw their daughter. Her mother specifically mentioned a phone call Adrienne had with her boyfriend, Tracy, and another teenager, David, who joined the call while Adrienne was on the phone. After midnight on the night of Adrienne's murder, one of her younger brothers heard a car engine outside their house. When he looked out the window, he saw a pickup truck driving away. The police were interested in identifying a person named David, who had called Adrienne that night. To learn more, they spoke with Adrienne's cross-country coach, who mentioned a team member named David Graham. However, the coach was surprised to hear that David had called Adrienne, as there was no indication that they had ever interacted before. David Graham was a 17-year-old high school student with big dreams. After watching his first air show, he decided he wanted to become an Air Force pilot. From then on, he dedicated himself to achieving his goal. David was well liked by his peers at Mansfield High School, where he was popular and charming. Many girls were attracted to him, but he was in a relationship with Diane Zamora, a high school senior who shared his desire to enter the military. Diane stood out from the crowd, actively pursuing her aspirations. After Adrian's murder, the police interviewed David Graham, who acknowledged knowing her from their cross-country team, but claimed their relationship never went beyond friendship. When asked if he had contacted Adrienne on the night of her death, David denied it, saying he was home studying with his girlfriend, Diane Zamora. The police investigated David as a possible suspect, seeking information from Adrianne's friends to see if she had ever mentioned him. However, one of her closest friends, who was privy to Adrianne's secrets, said Adrianne had never discussed David with her. The police also checked Adrianne's phone book and found David's number was not listed, which further led them to believe he was not involved in her murder. As a result, they never administered a polygraph test to David and eventually cleared him as a suspect. The police investigated Adrianne's boyfriend, Tracy Smith, as a suspect in her murder. However, they cleared him after verifying his alibi, which placed him out of town with his family on the night of the murder. Tracy also passed a polygraph test, further supporting his innocence. During his police interview, Tracy suggested they investigate someone named Brian, whom Adrianne had mentioned was calling her on the night of her murder while they were on the phone. The police identified the Brian in question as Brian McMillian, a local teenager. Their investigation into Brian McMillian revealed that he used to work at a pharmacy near the restaurant where Adrianne used to work. Brian had developed an obsession with Adrianne and would often visit the restaurant to catch a glimpse of her. Eventually, Adrianne grew tired of his constant presence and began hiding in the back whenever she saw him coming. The police questioned Brian McMillian about the murder of Adrian Jones. At first, he claimed to have no knowledge of her, but later admitted to knowing her. When asked if he had talked to her on the night of her murder, Brian said he didn't remember. He explained that he had been drinking that night due to feelings of depression and loneliness. The officers also asked Brian if he had visited Adrianne's house on the night of her murder, and he acknowledged that he might have done so. The police asked Brian's father if his son could take a lie detector test, but his father refused. 1 week later, the police raided Brian's house with guns, a decision made due to concerns that he might be armed. The police took this precaution to ensure everyone's safety, including their own. After Brian was arrested for Adrianne's murder, many people came forward to show their support for him. Brian's friends said he was a gentle and non-violent person. His father also confirmed that Brian was at home all night when Adrianne was killed and didn't leave. Despite this, Brian was held in jail for 3 weeks, missing Christmas and New Year's, while the investigation and legal proceedings continued. During this time, the district attorney's office asked Brian to take a polygraph test, which he passed successfully. After this, the district attorney's office had little evidence to link Brian to Adrianne's murder, so they released him from custody. 9 months into the investigation, the police in Mansfield, Texas, finally got a breakthrough, and it came from Annapolis, Maryland, where Diane Zamora was attending the Naval Academy. Diane Zamora, a cadet at the Naval Academy, allegedly confessed to her fellow students that she and her boyfriend, David Graham, had murdered a girl named Adrienne Jones in Mansfield, Texas. The Mansfield police traveled to Annapolis, Maryland, to interview Diane, but she denied making any such admission. The Naval Academy suspended Diane and sent her home pending an investigation. Since Diane was uncooperative, the police went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to question David. Initially, David claimed he didn't know why Diane would fabricate a story about killing Adrienne Jones. However, during the interview, David began to crack and asked to write a statement. In a 4.5-page confession letter, David detailed how he and Diane planned and carried out the murder of Adrienne Jones, including a cross-country event in November 1995, where he offered to drive Adrienne home. During the ride, David and Adrienne parked in an elementary school parking lot and had sex. Afterwards, David felt overwhelmed with guilt because he loved his girlfriend Diane deeply and knew that his infidelity would cause her immense pain. One evening, while David was helping Diane study for her SATs, they got into an argument. Unable to keep his secret any longer, David broke down in tears and confessed his infidelity to Diane. He told her that he had hooked up with Adrienne, which shattered Diane's heart and left her feeling deeply hurt and angry. Diane was inconsolable and lashed out at David, screaming and arguing with him. She was so angry that she wished he were dead, and she felt intense hatred towards Adrienne. Diane's emotions were too much to handle, and she struggled to come to terms with what had happened. David pleaded with Diane, promising to do whatever it took to save their relationship. David and Diane decided that the only way to repair their relationship was to kill Adrienne. In his confession letter, David admitted that on December 3rd, he called Adrienne Jones and asked her to secretly leave her house late at night to meet with him. He specifically asked Adrienne to keep their meeting private and not tell anyone else about it. David originally planned to lure Adrienne into a trap, kill her by breaking her neck, and then dispose of her body in a lake. On the agreed night at 2:30 a.m., David picked up Adrienne in his car while Diane hid in the hatchback. They drove to a secluded spot 10 miles out of town, turning off the highway onto Satan Road. David stopped the car, and Adrienne subtly adjusted her seat, creating the impression they were about to be intimate. Unbeknownst to Adrienne, David had secretly signaled for Diane to emerge from the trunk. Diane came out of the rear of the vehicle and approached the front. Diane confronted Adrienne, who was seated in the passenger seat. Diane then hit Adrienne on the head with a weight from David's gym set. Despite being severely injured, Adrienne managed to escape by crawling out of the car window. David and Diane panicked, and David grabbed his 9mm Makarov weapon to chase after Adrienne. Adrienne was severely injured and collapsed in a nearby field due to her head wound. When David caught up to her, he shot her twice and then returned to his car. After Adrienne died, David and his accomplice Diane exchanged "I love you" as their first words to each other. The police later questioned Diane, who had a statement prepared to confess her involvement. David and Diane were arrested and charged with capital murder. Although they initially confessed, they later retracted their statements, with David claiming Diane acted alone and Diane alleging David committed the crime by himself. In 1998, Adrienne's mother requested that the death penalty be removed as a possible sentence for David and Diane. Diane's trial began in February 1998. Multiple witnesses testified that Diane showed no remorse for killing Adrienne. The jury found Diane guilty of capital murder, resulting in an automatic life imprisonment sentence, with the possibility of parole in 40 years. David Graham was convicted of murdering Adrienne Jones and received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole in 40 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katrina Ashley Edlund Smith. Katrina Ashley Edlund was born on July 16, 1982, to her mother Vicky. She had two siblings, an older brother named Chad and a younger sister named Miranda, who looked up to Katrina as a role model. As children, Miranda would often try on Katrina's clothes and use her makeup, admiring her older sister and wanting to be just like her. As the years passed, Katrina and Miranda formed a strong bond, becoming more like best friends than sisters. Katrina grew up in Musney Park, Illinois, a suburban community outside the city, after her parents separated, and she lived with her mother. Those who knew Katrina described her as a kind, fun-loving person who cherished the holiday season and enjoyed giving humorous gifts to her friends and family. She was deeply involved in her church and had a strong desire to help others, always willing to lend a hand to those in need. Despite her happiness, Katrina longed to find love and thought she had found it when she met Todd Smith at a bar when she was 20 years old. Todd, a self-employed financial planner, had 3 daughters and worked from home. He met Katrina, and despite their differences, they clicked. Todd's flexible schedule allowed them to travel frequently. After 3 years together, Todd proposed to Katrina, and she happily accepted. They planned a small wedding in a local park, and Katrina was thrilled about their future. She loved Todd's daughters and was eager to build a life with him. Katrina's family, including her mother Vicky and siblings Chad and Miranda, adored Todd and thought he was an excellent match for Katrina. They trusted him to take care of her and believed the couple was meant to be. After marrying, Katrina and Todd settled in Masney Park and started their new life together. On October 20th, 2012, Katrina, 30, called her mother and said she was house-sitting for a friend. During their conversation, she mentioned she would visit for dinner on October 24th and had news to share. Vicky suspected that something was amiss, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Before ending their phone call, Vicky promised Katrina that she would cook her favorite meal, chicken and dumplings. Tragically, Vicky would never get the chance to keep that promise. Days later, Katrina vanished, and Vicky would never lay eyes on her again. On October 23rd, at 5 p.m., Todd, Katrina's husband, called 911 to report her disappearance. He told the dispatcher that Katrina was house-sitting for a friend and that he had been trying to reach her for hours without success. When he drove to the house, he found it empty. Katrina's siblings, Miranda and Chad, were alarmed when they heard the news. Chad, who was undergoing military training in Oklahoma, immediately flew to Illinois to help search for his sister. On the evening of the 23rd, a concerned citizen notified the police about an abandoned vehicle near Rock River. The caller reported that the car was not parked on the road, but rather in an easement, suggesting it had been hastily abandoned. When authorities arrived to investigate, they ran the license plate and identified it as belonging to Katrina Smith. Upon inspecting the vehicle, the officer found no signs of a struggle or any trace of Katrina herself. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was adamant that her daughter's disappearance was a clear indication of foul play when she learned that Katrina's car had been abandoned in an unfamiliar area. It was the only logical explanation to Vicky. If Katrina's car was found in that location, someone must have taken her and left the car there. Following the discovery of her car, Katrina's case was officially categorized as a missing person, and the search efforts intensified significantly. On October 12th, at 11 p.m., the police took Todd Smith in for a formal interview at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. During the interview, Todd told the detective that he last saw his wife Katrina on October 10th, not October 22nd. He stated that Katrina had come home briefly to do laundry in preparation for a big job interview the following day. According to Todd, while the laundry was in progress, Katrina left to go to the mall to make a purchase and returned home at 8:30 p.m. Todd reported that Katrina briefly returned home before leaving again to make one last stop. She had told him she needed to complete an errand before returning to the house she was watching for a friend. The next day, after Katrina was declared missing, Todd made an emotional appeal to the media, pleading for her safe return. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears as he begged for anyone with information about her whereabouts to come forward. As the search for Katrina continued, search teams composed of officers and volunteers worked tirelessly to find her. They focused their efforts on a nearby park, where Katrina's car had been abandoned, hoping to find evidence or clues about her disappearance. When Katrina's brother Chad arrived in Illinois from his army training in Oklahoma, he joined the search for his missing sister at the park. With his military background, Chad took charge of the search party. He created a map, divided the volunteers into teams, and coordinated their efforts to ensure a thorough search. As the search continued, the officers employed a methodical approach, using dogs and walking in straight lines to cover as much ground as possible and detect any potential evidence, no matter how small. Meanwhile, Katrina's mother, Vicky, focused on spreading awareness about her daughter's disappearance. She posted missing person flyers at gas stations, convenience stores, and lampposts throughout the town, hoping to reach as many people as possible. Despite her overwhelming grief and fear of finding her daughter's body, Vicky was determined to keep searching for Katrina, even if she couldn't participate in the physical search herself. Todd, Katrina's husband, was overcome with emotion during this difficult time. Chad, trying to be supportive, urged Todd to stay strong and focused on finding Katrina. He stood by Todd's side, sympathetic to his brother-in-law's grief. Meanwhile, the police investigation turned up some disturbing clues. An officer found Katrina's purse near her abandoned car, and as he searched further down the road, he discovered more of her belongings, including her cell phone and bloody towels. It was clear that someone had deliberately discarded Katrina's possessions as they drove away from her car. Unfortunately, the police still had no idea where Katrina was, but they feared the worst. The recovered items were sent to the crime lab for analysis, and the police awaited the results with bated breath. As the police searched for clues, they explored every aspect of Katrina's personal life to understand what might have led to her disappearance. They wanted to know if she had any relationships outside her marriage, was involved in gambling or drugs, and what her daily routines were like. To gather this information, they interviewed her friends and family. Everyone they spoke to described Katrina as a kind, responsible person who always put her duties first and avoided anything risky. Her loved ones said she was dedicated to her job and had a strong work ethic. They also reported that she never showed any signs of addiction or irresponsible behavior. The people who knew Katrina described her as a loyal partner and a hard worker who always did the right thing. During the investigation into her disappearance, a woman came forward with an interesting clue. She claimed to have seen a blue car, similar to Katrina's, parked on a bridge over Rock River on the night she vanished. The trunk was open, and someone was kneeling behind it. Although the witness couldn't describe the person's gender or race, her tip led the police to suspect that Katrina might have been a victim of foul play and ended up in the river. However, they still needed concrete evidence to support this theory. The police continued to investigate Katrina's disappearance, looking into potential motives and suspects. Despite seeming to have a happy marriage, her husband Todd was still a person of interest. As the authorities knew that hidden conflicts or secrets can exist in any relationship, their inquiry led them to a teenager in town who had previously shown an unhealthy obsession with Katrina. Earlier in the year, Katrina had confided in friends about the boy's behavior, including allegations of voyeurism, such as spying on her through her bedroom window. This had made Katrina increasingly anxious at the time. Although the boy's activities had stopped when he left for college, the police wondered if he might have returned and resumed stalking Katrina. They devoted significant resources to finding him. 3 days into the search, crucial clues were discovered on Katrina's cell phone, which was being examined at the crime lab. The phone proved to be a crucial source of evidence for the investigators. By examining Katrina's cell phone records, they uncovered a wealth of information, including her text messages, call logs, pictures, videos, and GPS location data. This information enabled the police to reconstruct a more accurate timeline of Katrina's activities. The investigation revealed that Katrina was having an affair with a co-worker, Guy Gabriel. Initially, they had met after work and developed a connection that eventually turned romantic. However, a background check on Guy Gabriel exposed a troubling history of domestic violence. Additionally, the detectives found text messages in which Guy Gabriel demanded that Katrina leave her husband Todd for him. Given Guy Gabriel's violent past and his messages to Katrina, he became the top suspect in her disappearance. The police suspected that Guy Gabriel might have reacted violently towards Katrina because she refused to leave her husband for him. When Katrina's family discovered her affair with Guy, they were shocked and disbelieving. The seemingly perfect couple, Katrina and Todd, had hidden a dark secret. The news of Katrina's infidelity devastated Todd, who was unaware of the affair until the police investigation. Guy Gabriel was questioned by the police at the station, and although he appeared nervous, he admitted to the affair, but denied any involvement in Katrina's disappearance. He claimed to have been at work on the night she went missing. During the investigation, the police uncovered an incident that had occurred 2 weeks before Katrina's disappearance. Witnesses reported that a black Volkswagen Jetta had sped through the parking lot of the auto shop where Katrina and Guy worked, causing a scene during lunchtime. A mysterious driver in a VW Jetta threw a stack of flyers out of the car's sunroof, scattering them among the employees gathered outside. The flyers contained a derogatory remark about Katrina and Guy Gabriel's relationship, but the identity of the driver remained unknown. Meanwhile, the police questioned Katrina's hairstylist, who shared that Katrina had confided in her about feeling unsafe and threatened. Katrina had even considered buying a gun for protection and had become paranoid about being followed. She had gone so far as to take her phone to a store to check for a tracking device, suspecting that someone was monitoring her movements. At the police garage, crime scene investigators searched Katrina's car for clues and used a special chemical called luminol to detect blood. They found a large amount of blood in the trunk. Meanwhile, a firefighter pulled a mysterious object from the water, which turned out to be a severely decomposed female body. The body was difficult to identify due to its condition. At the medical examiner's office, dental experts compared the body's teeth to Katrina Smith's dental records and confirmed that the body belonged to her. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Katrina's family was devastated by the news, and her mother, Vicky, was in disbelief. The police cleared the teenage boy who had been allegedly stalking Katrina as a suspect after verifying his alibi. The police then turned their attention to Guy Gabriel, Katrina's boyfriend outside of her marriage. Guy provided an alibi, claiming he was at work during the time of Katrina's disappearance and murder. His managers and co-workers corroborated his alibi, and the police cleared him as a suspect. Although Guy was no longer a suspect, the police asked for his perspective on who may have hurt Katrina. Guy revealed that Katrina's husband, Todd, exhibited controlling behavior and encouraged Katrina to leave her marriage. The police investigated Katrina's marriage and discovered several concerning details, including Katrina's desire to divorce Todd, her meeting with a divorce attorney, and her separation from Todd. The police suspected Todd of being behind the mysterious flyer incident at Katrina's workplace. Their suspicion grew stronger when they discovered that Todd had test-driven a black Jetta, similar to the car involved in the flyer incident, around the same time it occurred. When the police informed Katrina's family that Todd was the prime suspect in her murder and was already in custody, they were shocked and devastated. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was particularly affected, feeling physically ill at the thought that Todd could be responsible for her daughter's murder. The police also discovered that Todd's financial investment company was facing legal troubles, providing a potential motive for the crime. Katrina was the sole breadwinner for her family since Todd was unemployed. The police suspected that Todd might have motive to kill his wife, as he would gain access to their funds if she left him and their daughters. To gather evidence, the police obtained a search warrant for the couple's home. During the search, they found a baseball bat in the garage with brays of blood on it, which led them to believe it might be the murder weapon. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma, suggesting a bat was used. A DNA test confirmed that the blood on the bat was Katrina's, linking the bat to the crime. The police also found a clean area under the car, which seemed suspicious. Further examination revealed that the bloodstains matched Katrina's DNA profile. 30 days after Katrina's murder, Todd was arrested and charged with her killing, bringing relief to her family. At his trial, the prosecution presented evidence that Katrina had recently visited a divorce attorney, indicating marital problems. On the night of the murder, Katrina had gone to Todd's house to do laundry for a job interview the next morning. The prosecution alleged that Katrina told Todd their marriage was over, triggering his violent reaction. They claimed that Todd grabbed a baseball bat, killed Katrina in the garage, and then disposed of her body by throwing it off a bridge at Rock River. The jury found Todd guilty and sentenced him to 55 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sherri Papini. Keith and Sherri Papini first met in middle school when Keith was in 7th grade and Sherri was in 8th. They shared their first kiss with each other. Their friendship flourished quickly and they remained close throughout their teenage years. However, as they grew older, they drifted apart and went their separate ways. Years later, Sherri married another man in 2006, but the marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years. After her divorce, Sherri found herself single again. Then, by chance, she ran into Keith, and the spark between them was immediately rekindled. The time they had spent apart had given them both personal growth and maturity, and they realized how much they had missed each other. Keith and Sherri decided to give their love a second chance, and they started dating. As they spent more time together, their connection grew stronger every day. Within a year of reuniting, they knew they were meant to be together. They got married in 2009 and had 2 children, settling down in Regan, California. Sherri used to work in telecommunications, but after having children, she became a stay-at-home mom. Keith continued to work at Best Buy as a member of the Geek Squad. The Papini family seemed to have a perfect life from the outside. However, on November 2, 2016, Keith's world was turned upside down when he came home to find his wife, Sherri, missing. It was unusual for her not to be there, as she was always home when he returned from work. At first, Keith thought she might have gone for a walk, but as time passed and she didn't come back, he grew increasingly worried. Keith called the daycare center their children attended to see if Sherri had picked them up. But the school secretary told him she hadn't. This heightened Keith's concern, and he decided to use the Find My iPhone app on his phone to track her location. The app showed that her phone was at the end of their driveway. Alarmed, Keith rushed outside to search the area and found Sherri's phone lying on the ground, with her headphones nearby. When Keith found Sherri's phone and headphones at the end of the driveway, he made a disturbing discovery. There were strands of hair entangled in the headphones. He immediately contacted the authorities at the Shasta County Sheriff's Office, who took Sherri's disappearance seriously and brought in the FBI right from the start. Keith was desperate to find Sherri and get her back safely. To do this, he knew it was crucial to get her name and face out to the public. So he spoke to the media, hoping to generate support and assistance in finding her. The media played a huge role in spreading the story of Sherri's disappearance, and her beauty, blonde hair, and blue eyes made her case especially captivating to the public. As a result, news channels eagerly covered every detail of the story. After Sherri went missing and it became public, the police received many tips, but none of them led to finding her. As they continued to investigate, they looked at Sherri's phone for clues. They found a heated text conversation between Sherri and her husband Keith from a few months earlier, which made the police suspicious of Keith's possible involvement. Despite this, Keith was cooperative and offered to take a lie detector test to clear his name. He passed the test. In addition to the argument with Keith, the police found texts on Sherri's phone from men using fake female names. It seemed like Sherri was planning to leave Keith. On November 10, 2016, the police tracked down one of these men and questioned him about Sherri's disappearance. The man claimed to have met Sherri 5 years prior at a restaurant during a work conference she was attending. Although he said he didn't know her current whereabouts, He shared some information about her relationship with her husband Keith. According to the man, Sherri did not respect Keith and was even fearful of him. He alleged that Keith was violent and abusive, often locking Sherri up in their home. After a tip from a man who knew Sherri, claiming that her husband Keith was abusive, the police launched an investigation. However, after speaking with friends and neighbors, they found no evidence to support the claims of Keith's violence. Several days into Sherri's disappearance, on November 24, 2016, the police received a call at 4:32 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning. The caller reported a woman in distress on the side of I-5. The police rushed to the scene and found a woman bound with chains and zip ties. It took a moment for the officers to realize Sherri Papini, who had been missing for days. Relieved to find her alive, they carefully freed her from the restraints and took her to the hospital for medical attention. When Sherri arrived at the hospital, it was clear that she had been through a traumatic experience. Her body was covered in bruises, her hair was noticeably shorter, and she had a burn mark on her arm, as well as a bad rash. She had also lost a significant amount of weight, weighing in at only 87 pounds. While Sherri was recovering at Woodland Memorial Hospital, the police tried to interview her, but she was too emotional to provide any information. The only condition under which she would cooperate was if her husband Keith was present in the room. With Keith by her side, Sherri recounted the terrifying incident. She said she was out jogging when a dark-colored SUV, driven by two women, approached her. She got out of the vehicle, pointed a gun at her, while Sherri Papini stayed in the car. Sherri was forced into the back of the SUV against her will. Before getting into the vehicle, Sherri had the presence of mind to leave behind her phone and headphones on the driveway, along with some strands of her hair. She did this intentionally, hoping that Keith would find them and realize something was wrong. Sherri shared the details of her abduction with the police and her husband Keith. During the journey, she kept dozing off in the back of the SUV, making it difficult for her to keep track of time. The two women had wrapped something around her face, preventing her from seeing her surroundings. They told her that she was being kidnapped because a man wanted to buy her and she was being taken to meet him. However, they refused to reveal the man's identity or location. Sherri was terrified and worried about her fate, unsure of where she was being taken or what would happen to her during her captivity. She also claimed to have been physically abused by one of the women, who frequently hit her, leaving her with multiple injuries. Sherri claimed that her captors branded her right shoulder with the word Exodus to attract a buyer, who was allegedly a police officer. She also said that her captors constantly played mariachi music, which she found disorienting and unsettling. This music added to the oppressive atmosphere of her captivity, making her feel more isolated. Sherri was held in a single room with a boarded-up window. She was chained in a closet that served as a bathroom with a bucket for sanitation purposes. About 3 weeks into her captivity, Sherri heard a gunshot. After that, she had been with her disappeared, leaving Sherri to wonder if she had been killed. Sherri Papini, who had been quiet until now, took control of the situation. She instructed Sherri to get into a car, and they drove along I-5. Without warning, the car stopped, leaving Sherri startled and disoriented. She looked around, trying to understand what was happening. The younger woman then told Sherri to get out of the car. Confused and unsure, Sherri cautiously did as she was told. As Sherri exited the car, she felt a mix of fear and excitement. Was this her chance to escape? Or was she being led into an even more dangerous situation? She was left with more questions than answers, feeling uncertain and scared. After being found safe on the side of I-5, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office held a press conference to announce Sherri's return. During the conference, the police reported that Sherri had been abducted by 2 Hispanic women, which sparked widespread concern among the public. However, this news brought unintended consequences. Following the press conference, a wave of racism erupted, targeting individuals of Spanish descent. The reporting of Sherry's abduction had fueled public fear and anxiety, leading some to unfairly blame individuals associated with the Hispanic community. After being abducted, Sherry returned home and began attending therapy sessions to cope with her trauma. As a California resident, she was eligible for the Victims' Compensation Fund, which uses public funds to help pay for victims' therapy. In the aftermath, she became withdrawn, spending more time at home and avoiding social outings. 1 year into the investigation, police released a composite sketch of 2 Hispanic women believed to be involved in the crime. Despite this development, no new leads emerged. The police also revealed that they had found male DNA on Sherry's underwear, which did not match her husband Keith's DNA. 2 years passed with no matches on the male DNA, and the case remained unsolved. However, in 2020, a long-awaited breakthrough finally occurred. The police working on Sherry's case decided to try a new approach to find the owner of the unknown DNA. They used a technique called familial DNA, which compares the DNA profile to potential relatives of the donor. This method is commonly used in criminal investigations to analyze DNA evidence and identify possible family members of a suspect. By looking at specific genetic traits shared among family members, investigators can create a shorter list of potential suspects and explore possible family connections. In the Sherry Papini case, the police were surprised to discover that the DNA found in her underwear matched a close relative of James Ray's, her ex-boyfriend. This new information raised many questions and became a crucial moment in the investigation. The police suspected Sherry's ex-boyfriend, James Ray's, of being involved in her abduction. To investigate, they collected a soda bottle from his trash in June 2020 and sent it to a forensic lab for DNA testing. A month later, the lab results showed a match between James's DNA and the DNA found on Sherry's underwear the day she was discovered. With this new evidence, the police went to James's home in Costa Mesa, California, where he worked at a sports shop, to ask him about Sherry's case. James told the police that he had dated Sherry about 10 years prior, and the last time he saw her was a year after they broke up. He claimed to have only heard about her disappearance and safe return through rumors. During the police interview, James initially denied any involvement in Sherry's kidnapping. However, as the conversation progressed, he revealed that he was still close friends with Sherry despite their breakup 10 years prior. Although James admitted to playing a role in her disappearance, he claimed he didn't kidnap her. Instead, he insisted he was merely assisting a friend in need. James reported to the police that Sherry reached out to him for help, claiming she needed to escape her abusive husband, Keith. On November 2, 2016, James told police that a friend had lent him a car, which he used the next day to pick up Sherry. According to James, Sherry hid in the back seat of the car, lying down during the drive to Costa Mesa. During her stay at James's house, Sherry mostly stayed in her room, only coming out to help with chores like cleaning and cooking. She even boarded up the bedroom window, as she wanted to feel secure with the door closed. James noticed that Sherry was intentionally trying to lose weight by barely eating. Sherry asked James to help her harm herself, including hitting herself to create bruises. James was uncomfortable with this request, but he still agreed to help her, even going so far as to shoot a hockey puck off her knee at her request. Despite his reservations, James participated in these harmful activities with Sherry. James confessed to branding Sherry with the word Exodus on her right shoulder using a wood-burning tool they had bought from Hobby Lobby. Before Sherry left his house, she asked James to get chains and zip ties, which he used to bind her securely before driving her to Regan, California. During the drive, Sherry told James to stop the car, which he did, and she escaped. When questioned by the police, James denied knowing anything about the 2 Hispanic women Sherry claimed had abducted her. However, when the police searched James's house, they were shocked to find that several rooms matched the descriptions Sherry had given of the place where she was held captive. Specifically, James' bedroom and closet exactly matched a drawing Sherri had made for the police, detailing the layout of the rooms she had been confined to. The police discovered a striking similarity between a table at James's house and the one Sherri described in her initial interviews. They decided to bring Sherri and Keith in for another interview at the police station. The police had accumulated substantial evidence that led them to believe Sherri had faked her own abduction. They intended to confront her with their findings during the interview. Before revealing the truth, they asked Sherri if she wanted Keith to leave the room. Sherri remained silent. The police then decided to leave the couple alone for a few minutes. During this time, Sherri approached Keith and confessed that she didn't want the police to find the Hispanic woman who had supposedly abducted her. She felt indebted to this woman for sparing her life. Sherri refused to press charges against the woman who attacked her. Keith listened to her reasons, but he was skeptical and worried. Sherri's explanation didn't make sense to him, and he was starting to get scared. He pointed out that even if Sherri didn't want to press charges, the attacker would still face consequences for her actions. The police re-entered the interview room with an update. They had found a familial DNA match for the male DNA on Sherri's clothing, and it led them to James Reyes, Sherri's ex-boyfriend. When Keith heard the name, he had a visceral reaction. He knew James as Sherri's ex. The police told Sherri and Keith that James Reyes, Sherri's ex-boyfriend, had passed a lie detector test. They suspected that Sherri had faked her own kidnapping and claimed to have evidence to support James's version of events. The police told Sherri that they believed her significant weight loss during her disappearance was intentional, as she had chosen to eat very little. They also suggested that the rash on her arm was caused by the cleaning products she had used at James's house. Furthermore, the police alleged that James had used a wooden tool bought from Hobby Lobby to brand Sherri. They also claimed that Sherri's broken nose was self-inflicted, caused by hitting herself with a hockey stick. Despite the mounting evidence against her, Sherri remained calm and pretended not to understand what the police were talking about. Sherri Papini claimed to have not seen her ex-boyfriend James in years, stating she last saw him at his brother's funeral in Southern California. However, the police knew she was lying because James had provided them with information about her disappearance that only someone close to her would know. On March 3, 2022, the FBI arrested Sherri on charges of lying to federal agents and faking her own abduction. 6 weeks later, she agreed to a plea deal, admitting to orchestrating her kidnapping. Sherri's lawyers requested a sentence of 1 month in prison, followed by 7 months of house arrest. However, the prosecution recommended an 18-month sentence. In September 2022, the judge sentenced Sherri to 18 months in prison and ordered her to pay a $300,000 fine. The judge doubted that Sherri would ever be able to pay the fine, saying it would take winning the lottery. During the sentencing, the judge called Sherri a manipulator and habitual liar, stating that he had no doubt she would have continued lying if she hadn't been caught. The judge told Sherri that she needed to be punished to stop others from committing similar crimes. Sherri had taken advantage of many resources, including money meant for victims, Social Security disability payments, and a GoFundMe account set up after her fake kidnapping. The judge wanted to deter others from committing similar crimes by punishing Sherri. She spoke at her sentencing hearing, expressing regret and apologizing to those who had suffered because of her actions. Sherri acknowledged her guilt, saying she was responsible for lying and bringing shame to herself and those around her. In August 2023, Sherri was released from prison and moved to a halfway house. Sherri and her husband Keith separated on the day of her arrest in March 2022. After Sherri pleaded guilty, Keith filed for divorce the next month and sought full custody of their children.